City Councilor. I am the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Ways and Means. Today's working session is on dockets 04800-20482. Orders for the FY23 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations for the school department and for other post-employment benefits OPEB. Dockets 0483, orders for the capital fund transfer appropriations. Dockets 0484 to 0486, orders for the capital budget, including loan orders and lease purchase agreements. As you know, the purpose of these working sessions is to facilitate a conversation among councilors about the FY23 budget and pursuant to the council's authority under the recently amended charter, discuss potential amendments the council would like to make to the FY23 budget appropriations as proposed. For those in the room with us today, I would like to note that we will not be holding a public comment period during our working sessions, but members of the public are encouraged to testify on the budget during budget hearings. Additional information on the schedule and how to testify can be found on the City Council's budget website for the future, boston.gov/council-budget. This working session is being recorded. It is being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Files Channel 964. I am joined today by my colleagues, Councilor Julia Mejia at large, Councilor Aaron Murphy at large, Councilor Michael Flaherty at large, Councilor President Ed Flynn, District 2, Councilor Kendra Lara, District 6, Councilor Liz Braden, District 9, Councilor Gabriela Coletta, District 1, Councilor Brian Worrell, District 4. If you're watching this later, you'll notice that other councilors will be joining us. They've sent me messages that they are running behind because they're attending a different event. This working sessions, for those of you who've never watched a working session from the home, is a bit, I guess, not as rigid or not with the same rules. We would be more casually going back and forth, but all by recommendations or facilitation by the chair, of course. So I ask you that you can raise your hand. You can call on my name if I don't see you. You can press your light to speak. There's going to be no order on how we're going to take comments, but as long as you wait until I call on your name to speak. Thank you. If you guys have any opening statement, light up your mics, and I will call on you to make your opening statements. Okay. In that case, today's working session will be the last of 4 working sessions for us as councilors to discuss together how we feel about the budget. Today, we'll continue our discussion on proposed amendments. And I guess I'm not going to, I can go in order of arrival for the amendment, any thoughts or amendment suggestions where we were, or I can start presenting, and then if it applies to you and you want to speak on it, raise your hand or light up your mic. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Trying to read the room. Everybody's so quiet. All right, so I don't feel the need for us to go through each individual presentation or each counselor and their amendment suggestions. I have a list of the amendments, at least that I feel I've taken out, at least that I feel that are appropriate to suggest to the administration. I've taken out all of the capital, any capital projects or any projects that, or any suggestions that we've discussed that could come from ARPA or that we could, or that we've already filed to request funds from ARPA. With that being said, I will read from description where it's going and where we're suggesting it comes from, and I will not read the counselor's name. If you want to make a comment, again, your mics or your hand. Thank you. So a counselor suggested the following. Additional inspector for pest control, $150,000 for additional inspector for pest control. I am suggesting that it comes from ISD to ISD. Any comments or concerns? All right, we'll keep going. $12,000 to add more rodent abatement from ISD to ISD. $13 Hokies altogether, and 2 in Alston Brighton, 1 in Chinatown, 2 in Roxbury. I'm sorry, you guys, it didn't print out. Let me just pull it up so that I can read the full description. Sorry about that. Okay, so that was 2 in Alston Brighton, 1 in Chinatown, 2 in East Boston, 2 in District 4, 2 in Roxbury, 2 in Fenway, Mission Hill, Beacon Hill, South End, and 2 citywide. I am suggesting that it comes from, well, the council, all of us, all 11 of us from the last from the last working session suggested that it comes from Boston Fire Department unspent funds to go to Boston from PWD, Public Works Department. And it'd be a total of $500,000. All right? Oh, yes, Councilor President Flynn?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Could you provide, or could someone provide a little more information on the unspent Boston Fire Department funds, and what part of money in the fire department was that money allocated to, for what purpose, and was the fire department not spending it for a particular reason, and maybe the reason is there was some type of shipping related issue, but I just want to get a better sense of why the fire department still has this unspent money. It may be unspent for an important reason. Okay.
Thank you, Council President Flynn. I don't have the actual explanation from what the administration has been sharing, is that this poses a problem because there is no specific unspent amounts that they've given me. And so I think that we could mark this as something to discuss further. Mm-hmm. And I do have a checklist of the things that we're okaying so far and the things that we have to come back and discuss before actually proposing it. Okay, so I've removed the checklist. It's not final. We'll come back so that we can discuss where else can we take money from.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair.
Councilor Murphy?
Yes. So like Councilor Flynn said, I did have a question at the last working session also, because there seemed to be several, when the column of where we're going to get the money from. So I do have the same question of, is this really unspent money, or is it just not? Is it extra on July 1st, or is it just not spent yet? So that clarification would be helpful.
Okay. The administration is here, and I'm happy to get those answers before making actual suggestions, actually submitting the amendment. But it's not checked yet. Let's table it for more further conversation.
Thank you.
No problem. Next is, so a bus company or an RFI for $100,000 to go to tourism for a tourist company to do tours in the areas of South End, Roxbury, and Dorchester. I don't actually, I think this will be tabled. I don't actually have a place to take this funds from yet, so I think we'll table it and come back to the conversation. For now, if I can just get through the list and we check off the things that we all are okay with moving forward. Thank you. So also $75,000 for the Mission Hill link to extend to Roxbury as well. The original suggestion was $50,000, and I'm recommending that we increase it to $75,000 so that we can extend it all the way through Roxbury as well. The original suggestion was to also come out of BFD unspent to go to Boston Transportation Department. We can table that as well, since the question of Boston Firefighter unspent funds is not clear. There was a suggestion for tree maintenance. Let me just be specific about the amount, $726,000 to go to tree maintenance, Urban Wild, for Power Corps and project manager grant to BGWT, and it would go to parks, personnel, and the suggestion was that it comes out of BPD unspent, Boston Police Department unspent. Any comments or concerns? Councilor Flaherty?
Madam Chair, we also had asked for a standalone tree pruning division, so is that incorporated in that? And the other question is, you're reading from a list, but this is the list we had the other day. So are we following along this, or is there a different list? I can't find what you're reading.
It's the same, except there's been conversations where I've either combined different ideas that sound similar, like as the one you just listed, and just to be very clear, yes, it does include tree pruning. I am documenting that now. And as far as your list, I've removed anything that was capital, anything that was suggested that could come out of ARPA dollars. And then, of course, my list looks like things that I think are green, like good to go. And then we'll get into more difficult conversations about those lists that I've said that we moved, the capital and the ARPA.
Okay.
I will go into record and say exactly what those are. But from the agreement that we came down to in the last working session, we said that we should remove them. Instead, I've just pushed them down the list and recategorized so that I can be more efficient in this meeting.
So then I guess the question is, in order for us as a city to have a standalone tree pruning division whereby each district, each Parks Department district would have their own tree pruner, I guess the question would be, would the suggestion from our colleague, would 700 and, I don't know what the number was, 725, would that be enough, I guess is my follow-up question.
Do we?
We currently now we contract it out, so anyone that needs tree pruning services in their respective districts have to reach out to the parks, they have to reach out to the arborists, they get told that they don't have enough arborists, they're told that they'll put it on the list, and then you can't cut them down certain times of the year, and then they don't get to that list, they'll put it on next year's list, and so people just take matters into their own hands and they just start cutting trees down on their own street. So I want to avoid that. particularly given the demands on tree canopy. And if we really want to put a shoulder into this and have a standalone tree pruning division for the Parks Department, where each of our districts, each of the Parks Department districts have tree pruning capacity, I guess what does that cost? And obviously I'm not a parks expert, but I just want to know whether or not that 700 that we're talking about now is enough. My suggestion is that we may need to go a little higher on that to have a legitimate bona fide tree pruning division of the Parks Department.
Okay. I don't recall exactly how many that would mean for each district, or if that even reaches the capacity that we want. I think that we can definitely, I've highlighted that we need to discuss the amount,
Perfect.
and we'll come back to it.
Thank you.
No, of
Thank you,
course.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay. $100,000 for 2 FTE SOAR, to the SOAR program in Charlestown. The suggestion that I'm making is that it comes from Boston Public Health Commission to Boston Public Health Commission. Okay, moving on. $650,000 toward civic engagement funds for each counselor's office to be able to provide reimbursement receipts to the council administration in order to fund civic engagement activities with, for constituents. Again, that would turn out to be $50,000 for each counselor's office. A total of $650,000. The suggestion was that it came out of BFD unused funds, but I've sent a message to administration so that we can get more clarity on that, and we'll return, so I won't give that a go. I know that the idea was a go, but obviously where we're decreasing the money is still unclear. So we'll come back to that. $8 million to fund summer jobs to 6,000 youth, and pay increase in 2023, FY 2023. This was a go in as far as the idea, and I think that we need to consider, after conversations with the administration, I think that we need to consider whether or not we are going to be able to get full support, meaning enough to override a decision from the administration. So we'll discuss this one and then we'll go on to the next one. Any questions or concerns? Councillor Lara, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleagues. I unfortunately was not here when we took the vote in support of the two suggested budget amendments that came from my office, specifically around youth jobs, but I know that a part of the conversation was about where the money comes from and getting agreement on where the money comes from. I know that most of us are in agreement about cutting this amount from the Boston Police Department's overtime budget, but we do not have a veto-proof majority. And so I have given all of my council colleagues a justification for pulling this amount from the Boston Police Department's budget. And if you allow me, I would like to talk through it a little bit just to share and see if by any chance I can convince my colleagues to vote in support of this amendment. We have been in conversations.
How long do you need?
Just a couple of minutes. I'm not going to read the entire thing. I think everybody has it. We have been in conversations with the administration about adjusting this number. The administration has not yet provided us with the justification for the attrition rates. They are working on it. They said that I would have it before the end of this hearing. So if for some reason there is a question or an ability for to shrink this number, then once we get the justification from the mayor's office, then we can have that conversation. But for right now, the amendment, I'm keeping the amendment as presented. So ultimately, the conversation was about using the Boston Police Department's overtime budget. On the first page, you can see the table that, one, cutting the police overtime budget is going to really lead to change in spending on overtime. From FY17 to FY20, the police overtime budget increased every single year, and in the same years, the spending also increased. The information that we have from the administration shows that in FY20 and FY21, when the police overtime budget was cut, the actual overtime spending actually lowered. And so even though we expect that the Boston Police Department is still going to go over the budget that we give them, cutting the police overtime budget is actually shown to signal to them that they need to be more prudent with their spending and shrink their numbers. And so we have that, and it shows that here. If we cut the overtime budget, ultimately, I think that it will have an impact in our spending, and it will signal to the Boston Police Department to spend less, even if they go over the budget that we are giving them. In recent history, and this is section 3, page 2 for the folks that are following along, the city has usually regularly ended up with far more than $13.7 million, which is the total of my budget request, in extra money available for appropriations than originally budgeted. So this money has usually gone to police overspending or back into the reserves, but it could have been responsibly used for additional appropriation. In fact, the city has had a surplus for many, many years. At the bottom of page 2 and at the top of page 3, you can see the city's surplus. So the expected recurring revenue minus the fixed costs are there from 2016 to 2021, and the money available for appropriations beyond the original budget. In 2016, $62.3 million. In 2017, $66.7 million. In 2018, $95.3 million. In 2019, $108.8 million. In 2020, $54.7 million. And in 2021, $30.1 million. The following chart just shows how we used that surplus in the same years. And so you can look at that chart and see where that money was split. And so the adopted budget calls for a $40 million in reserves to be used, but in all of those years, the $40 million has actually has not been used because we've had so much overage. We've had so much surplus that we haven't had to use the $40 million, and the city, in fact, has had a surplus. And so in the next chart, you can see how we spent that money between police overspending, other departments, and money budgeted from reserves, and then surplus that we had, which is money to add back into the reserves. So for the last 4 years, we have had 21.2, 22.6, 15.3, and 15.4, all numbers that are bigger than the 13.7 million that we're requesting, meaning that even if we take this money from the police overtime budget, even if the Boston Police Department goes over the overtime budget that we give them, we are still not going to be cutting into the City of Boston surplus, and we're going to be able to meet it into this budget, which is meaning that we're not trying to go and find a loophole into increasing the budget. We're not increasing the budget amount. If you go to the bottom of page 5, the bottom of page 4, point 4, section 4, basically notes that the mayor's revenue estimates in June are higher than the original estimates that we have in April. So the budget that we have right now, the estimates for the appropriations are basically lower than what we're going to get from the mayor's proposed investments. So even if we use this revenue to adopt some of the city council's proposed investments, the mayor can use some of that money. Even if the mayor rejects the city council's proposed cuts, there's still money to be used there. And you can see there in that table for the past 3 years, the April proposed budget and the June final for appropriations. In section 5, in the middle of page 5, it's basically talking about budget health. I think people are concerned about budget health. And in the very unlikely event, as you can see in all of the tables that I've given you, that moving 13.7 million from police overtime would lead to any additional spending from the reserves, the amount would be incredibly small compared to the city's fund balance and reserves. So at the end of 2022, the city had a fund balance of $1.21 billion, which is 30% of our annual expenditures. $13.7 million represents a 1.1% of this amount. In fact, every single year, the Massachusetts Department of Revenue certifies our budgetary fund balance, which we call free cash here. So this is not the amount that the city has in cash on hand. It's actually defined as the portion available of reserves which the city can, and this is the key word, responsibly appropriate for spending. Meaning that we could spend the entire amount and it would have no impact on the financial health of the city of Boston. So it's defined as the amount that we can use responsibly. So the state certifies this every year. So we could use all of the budgetary fund balance without jeopardizing the health of the city. The budgetary fund balance, our free cash, has increased every single year since 2014 and is currently at $428.1 million.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor,
Yes.
there are at least, I know that at least one or two, very minimum one person, but max two councilors are on their way. We can hold to get a general consensus from when those folks join us, those councilors join us.
Yep.
And we'll come back and reserve questions and discussions for that time.
Absolutely.
But I think at this point, we all, well, the majority, you've already gained the majority support in terms of the idea. We need to, I now as the chair need to see if you can get that 9, okay? The 9 votes support. And if we can, then that's what determines it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. So we're tabling a conversation about $8 million to be removed from Boston Police overtime to go to YEE for youth summer jobs, as well as the following, which is $5 million. It's about 5.5, also for youth jobs coming out of Boston Police overtime as well. Councilor, would you like to proceed, since we have enough people now? Okay. The question on the table, one moment. The question on the table is that we've already supported the idea, but what the determining factor is whether or not we can get 9 support on the 9 councilors to support the idea, 9 councilors to support where it's coming from. And if that's the case, it goes through. Councilor Bach, did you have a comment or question?
I'm going to say that Councilor Baker is also on his way up. That was all.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. Sorry, just taking some notes. It would seem that we have enough people to try to get 9. If Councilor Baker is on his way, we can wait. Councilor Lara, what would you like to do?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because I wasn't here at the end of our last amendment session to see how my council colleagues voted in terms of removing this amount from the Boston Police overtime budget, I would like to ask for a roll call vote so then we can start the conversation from there.
So not a vote, but
Just to see who the 8 folks who support it coming out of the Boston Police overtime budget. I think that my time would best be used in answering questions for my council colleagues who are not supportive to see what they need in order to be supportive of this measure.
right.
Yeah.
Do you want to move that forward now or wait for Councilor Baker?
I think we can move it forward now. I think Councilor Baker can jump on as well. We're trying to get to 9. We have 9 votes here.
Okay. So Councilor Lara feels she may get 9 support now. All right, so I'm going to ask each councilor by name to raise their hand based on, do you support the idea? First. The same that we're discussing now. Please don't call me, please raise your hand or light up your mic. Yes, Council Bach?
I think from a rules perspective, this can't be a formal vote. The council hasn't noticed
I've
this
made
is a
that
voting
clear.
session. Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councillor?
I think I'm certainly in favour of supporting funding youth jobs, but one of the challenges we have is onboarding them in a timely fashion. So I think, do we have the capacity? Do we need, if we're going to do this, do we have the capacity to onboard them within quick order? I think in the last few years of my being on the council, that has always been the challenge. So the onboarding process has to be really a quick turnaround, and if we're increasing the number of young people that we want to offer youth jobs to, do we have to increase the capacity of our human resources department to facilitate that onboarding? And it's just like, I think the goal, we're all in agreement of the goal. It's a good idea, but it's really how we get there and the logistics of making it happen are important details that we need to attend to.
Councilor Lara?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can answer through the chair that question for Councilor Braden. The answer to that is yes. So this measure of increasing the youth jobs to 6,000 for the summer and 1,500 for the school year is actually coming from the mayor's office and has been submitted to us in that way. So my assumption is that the mayor believes that the Human Resources Department and the YEE also has the capacity to onboard young people. Part of our original amendment actually included increasing the time period when young people are hired, meaning that they're starting from September to June. That is no longer a part of our request because we know that we don't have the capacity to ultimately onboard them in that time frame. I did have a meeting with Chief Masso yesterday, and Chief Masso was very clear that we are going to be, they're going to be working on ultimately putting a proposal forward for making sure that YE is doing their own hiring and that we don't have to use the city's human resource basically database, because it is what is slowing us down. So there is currently a plan to move it forward. We don't have the capacity in terms of doing it in a timely manner, which is why we're not requesting that the jobs run from September to June anymore, because we would need to make an investment in their own database, and they're not prepared to make that request yet. In our conversation, we also talked about what the outreach plan would be between my office and other counselors to make sure that we fill those jobs. But as of right now, Mayor Wu has said that she wants to increase it to 6,000 to 1,500 year-round. My amendment is only to make sure that the finances and the budget actually reflects the amount necessary to do that. So I would also extend that question to the mayors, to the administration, to say, do they feel prepared to ultimately house the jobs that they're proposing?
6 weeks away, we're going to start expending this money on July 1st for this summer.
The youth jobs hiring schedule will remain the same as it has every year.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the capacity of the Human Resource Department is all set, ready to go in 6 weeks, like right now.
I think if the mayor's off, I think that if something has changed, the administration would have to let you know that. But as far as I'm concerned, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Bach?
Two things. So just to follow up on Councilor Braden's point, I think the point is that they have not changed the systems that are actually going to onboard young people to start on whatever that Monday is. And I think we've, the last 2 years, experienced tremendous frustration with those delaying back a week, 2 weeks, et cetera. So I think Councilor Braden's point is that there are some of the ineffective aspects of the system that you were talking about that they need to fix are not going to get fixed in time to not have some of the attrition in terms of like net total amount of money, right? Because I don't think the challenges that have prevented YEE from onboarding everybody on the first day of the jobs program in July are still going to be there in a month.
Madam Chair, may I?
Oh, yes, no, you can go back and forth until I stop you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. That is true in terms of where we are prepared to bring them on. I think that we know that there is a percentage of attrition. The administration has failed to provide us the justification for the attrition or the amount. They have given us a ballpark of anywhere from 25 to 30%. I have asked for that justification. So we are willing to meet the attrition rate in terms of the amount, but we still don't have that number. They did say that they would have that number for me before this hearing was over. So I think that if we are suggesting that we don't have the infrastructure and therefore we shouldn't fund the jobs, we need to be able to, like, I guess through the chair, that's the question for Councilor Bach. Are you suggesting that we don't fully fund them because, okay.
No.
I'm sorry, don't speak out of turn. So we went over instructions, and I'm going to give them one more time.
Thank you.
Let me give them one more time, please. I will call on to you to begin a conversation. You are open to going back and forth, questions and answers with the person presenting. I will decide when that conversation needs to stop. You can light up your mic or raise your hand to be called on. If I don't see you and my head is way turned, fine, say Madam Chair. But I would hope that that's not your first option, because everyone would be like, Madam Chair, Madam Chair. Or T-money bags. Either way. So I would like for you guys to get into dialogues, but that I moderate that. Does anyone have any questions about that process? Cool. If the two of them are going back and forth, I would ask that you wait a turn before you can engage the presenter. Council Bach, please continue.
Yeah, so I think the question is about, well, 2 points. I think one thing is that, and I know I missed Councilor Lara's presentation, but I did have notes on it from my staff, so forgive me if I get it wrong. But my impression is, it's the idea of kind of, well, we know that we've run surpluses in the past, let's take money, we take money from the overtime, they run over, then we know we're gonna have it in the surplus. I think as we were discussing in the last working session, there's a limit to how much of that the council can do and still plausibly seem fiscally responsible. And I think that since we're operating under a balanced budget amendment, and I think the challenge of this history here is that, well, I agree with you that for a lot of years, the administration was being pretty fiscally conservative and running these big surpluses. Last year was, as you know, the first year in a while that we took the 40, and last year's budget was also supported by 55 in federal dollars, and there's a proposal for another 40 in federal dollars. So the reality is what we've done as a city is we've allowed our budget to continue to climb through the COVID period, including with the revenue declines, by backfilling with federal funds. And so I think, there's in that context, last year, where we had to take the 40 is a better guide than sort of like the years previous to the pandemic, in which I agree, we're running very substantial surpluses. So, I mean, my gut on this is that I think we can and should take some of the police overtime line, because I agree with you that it sends a good signal to the department about the council's deep impatience with the huge cost overruns. But we also fundamentally know that that line is not going to come down until we get contract reform. So I think the council has to be careful about how much additional we add to the budget in light of the fact that we're still replacing revenue with federal dollars. So because of all that, the question for me about this, how are we not prepared to get everybody into a 6-week youth job, which is unbelievably frustrating to me, and at YE will tell you I have bothered them about for the last 2 years systems-wise, is that what doesn't make sense, I think, is for the council to take more than necessary out of that budget in terms of like who we can actually get viably on the rolls, right? In terms of the current systems that YE has set up. So I guess the point, to Councilor Lara's point, and I hear you on the administration hasn't provided these numbers, so that's a frustrating thing. It's like, I don't think that this number is up at 13, is it 13.7? Sorry, I've forgotten, but like, I don't think that it's realistically at 13.7 in terms of what we could use if we got all guns blazing today on getting like every youth into a job with the city's current systems. I'm hopeful that we can change the rate at which YE converts job opportunities into actual jobs and pay for young people, because I think it's been hovering at more like 50%, which as opposed to even the 75%, which would be a plus. I think the shift into grants has helped that. But yeah, so for me, that's what I'm balancing. It's like, I'd like to see us grow the YE line. And so yeah, the question back would be like, I'd like to see us grow the YE line, but I do think there's a real concern about how the council communicates sort of its fiscal responsibility for the city and doesn't deliberately just draw from a surplus that could be less strong this year than it was in the pre-pandemic years. So.
Thank you. Did you want to respond?
Yes. So one, this idea of fiscal responsibility, right? And I know that you missed my presentation, but all of that information is there in the packet in front of you that details very clearly how we would not in any way, shape, or form be putting the city of Boston in any fiscal jeopardy, and also we would not be dipping into the surpluses at all. It's very, very, very small chance that we would be dipping into the surplus, given all that we have. Even with the lower numbers after the pandemic, the surplus money that we had to add back into the reserves, that's after we had an extra and then appropriated those funds, was still 15.4 million. So even with the pandemic, we still wouldn't be cutting into any surplus if the police overtime. And just to be clear, because I think it's important to say this, increasing this line item is not going into the surplus. What would go into the surplus is the Boston Police Department's overspending. If they overspend, that would cut into the surplus. Now, obviously, we're functioning under the assumption that they're going to go over because the Boston Police Department has been led to just run freely and go over their overtime budget every single year for God knows how long, but we would not be cutting into the surplus. And based on the money that we have in our surpluses and based on what the Massachusetts Department of Revenue has ultimately told us that we can responsibly appropriate for spending, and has been certified every year in our budgetary fund balance, we have more than enough to be able to do that without actually having any impact on the city's financial health. So the argument is not there to make. The numbers do not reflect that argument in terms of what we're spending at all. I'm more than happy, and I share your frustration in terms of how many youth jobs we can actually take on based on like our capacity and all of the logistical things. And also, if the money is left over in the budget, both Mayor Menino and Mayor Walsh in previous years have granted that money to both the Private Industry Council and ABCD to have it used for jobs. And so it doesn't mean that just because we can't house that many jobs or we can't hire that many young people, that money is somehow gonna go unspent. We have precedents from other mayors in terms of making sure that we grant that money out before the fiscal year is up as well.
Thank you. We'll stop there. Can we get a vote on it? Sorry, was this about this discussion here? Councilman Mejia?
Chair, thank you, Madam Chair. And so, at the risk of being vulnerable, I just wanted to ask, I know there's a lot on the line here, right? And we're talking about an opportunity for us to change the way we do business, right? And it's 1 year's budget, right? So let's just say, for instance, what lessons can we learn, right? Based on the things that we are embarking on. And, you know, in terms of supporting this, right? It really is like, if we can build the infrastructure and that we can finally get to a point where we're fully funding youth jobs, let's have an opportunity to see what that could look like, right? And supporting this initiative this year is an opportunity for us to step it up a notch. So I just think that sometimes we are so afraid of taking risks, but if we don't, then we may never move the needle. So I just wanted to just name that. I think we should, it's a year. It's not a life sentence here. So,
thank you, Councilman Mejia.
Yeah.
Thank you. Council Block, I'm sorry, it didn't finish. Did you have a last point to make?
Yeah, and I guess a question to you, the chair. So first question is, and again, I'm sorry that I was late. Are any of the other items in the chair's amendment packet drawing from police overtime?
No.
Okay. And so then I guess, so two quick things. One is just to say that I appreciate the point about 1 year, et cetera. I do think we just have to keep in mind that the budgetary fund balance gets certified every year for future one-time spending. And so one of the challenges we have here is that I think we would all like to see a permanently more robust youth program. So I think that is a type of money budget challenge for us, because we wouldn't do this every year, but we would want this to continue every year. The other thing I just want to say is, like, I would be happy to support a council vote to, take from police overtime and give to YE in this round, with the proviso that if the administration comes back with more info about, like, okay, we're doing everything we possibly can, what's the number of actual, like, hours that we can get into our young people's hands this year with our program, and it's lower, that, like, my support would match what seemed viable. So I just want to flag that I think the movement is, to Councilor Mejia's point, the right direction, but I would want to flag with a vote that, like, I would be waiting to see what was actually doable for this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Block. Councilor Coletta, then Councilor Lara. I think that once we hear people that haven't been heard, if they want to speak, we're going to move for people to show their support or not and close this conversation. Councilor Coletta.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councilor, for this proposal. This was really well done, this memo. So kudos to you and your team. I think, again, I just echo my colleagues, Councilor Bach and Councilor Braden, where I think we all agree that there should be more youth jobs, but my concern is that we need to be able to set YE up for success. And so I'm worried about again, the ineffective aspects of the system that are not going to be able to be fixed on time. So I would like to get that information from the administration. I know we're waiting on it. I would feel more comfortable voting on this until I had that information. And just in general, talking about fiscal responsibility, there are other amendments, or there were amendments from other councilors pulling from BPD discretionary. So this is news to me that it's coming, that this particular amendment is coming from, or is going to be the majority of BPD discretionary. So I do support Councilor Bach's proviso, and I think I would like to come to consensus on where the other items are coming from before we vote on this. Thank you.
The concern was that we didn't want to just pile on a whole bunch of things in BFD, a whole bunch of things in BPD. So as we go through this, you will see that a lot of, there is just, I think I take that back. So there is just one other that's coming from BPD, and it's actually recommended by you. But I have I've basically taken out things that I feel can be moved around inter-department or from other areas, and we'll go through that, and it's open for discussion.
Has the administration agreed to these amendments? So if it's going to ISD and it's coming from ISD, have they all agreed to this? Have you been in contact with them, and is this actually possible, right?
There's been discussions. The administration has not confirmed nor denied anything.
Okay.
And they won't until we submit, until we actually make our recommendation.
That's a good question.
Councilor Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the comments I have regarding the police overtime budget is if we're going down this route where we're going to cut from the police department budget in their overtime pot of money, are we able to get, I'd like to get a sense of what impact that would have going forward on already scheduled events that we would need a major police presence for. For example, not to get ahead of ourselves, but if there were a parade, if the Celtics won, usually that parade would be about $1 to $2 million for Boston police, maybe $1 million, in their overtime budget, which is a significant amount. As we head into July, there are a lot of events in Boston trying to build up the tourism of the city, especially in and around the downtown area, and I know we want to focus the tourism as well into the neighborhoods. We usually have ships that come into the city. But if we are cutting back the police budget, is this the opportunity for us to also discuss cutting back on events that are happening in Boston over the next 3 months, over the next 5 months, over the next 6 months? Because if we are cutting the police overtime budget, when we should not be going forward on a lot of these major tourism events that impact the economy of Boston. So you know, if we're going to cut the overtime budget, I think in all seriousness, we should have an honest discussion about, you know, future parades that we have in this city as well. That's a significant amount of overtime budget that the police use, and they are needed in various neighborhoods across the city, because some of these parades, we have 500,000 people. If there were a parade for the Boston Celtics, there could be 2 million people in the city. So you know, I would want us to have an honest discussion and say, if we are cutting the overtime budget, that let's eliminate these parades. It seems drastic, and it seems like we're hurting the neighborhoods, which I probably think we are. But we're in these difficult financial times, and if we're making these cuts, then we're going to have to cut various events happening in and around the downtown area, in and around the city as well. So those are my comments. I hope we can think about that as we vote as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor President Flynn. Let's go back to the original. Yes, Councilor.
Sorry to
Baker,
come
I
in
see
late.
you.
I'm kind of trying
No
to figure out what the
worries,
game
but
is.
you don't
What game we're.
have permission to speak yet. Please give me a moment. Thank you so much. I think that if we raise our hand and we know that we have an issue with it, we'll address the people that have an issue. Councilor, are you open to address the person that is in disagreement? And I think that by process of elimination, we can get to a solution as opposed to just going back and forth and everybody commenting. So if we can move forward, I see Councilor Baker's, Councilor Flaherty, then Councilor Arroyo.
Just a quick point of order. We're talking, I'm hearing about people talking about votes. Are we voting on something here today, or is this for our council meeting
No
part of the
voting,
budget?
just a general consensus on, do we have enough votes to even submit this thing?
We're debating here.
Or support?
And one more question. So do the amendments all have to go in all up or down, or like, I'm not sure how this is.
One amendment.
So we have to approve all the amendments or disapprove all the amendments?
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Flaherty?
Chair, just wanted to state that the Boston City Council has always supported our youth, and this is usually the time where we throw an extra shoulder into youth summer jobs as well as year-round jobs. So I obviously appreciate the maker's push here. Would say that obviously summer jobs and year-round jobs make a tremendous difference in keeping kids in school, giving them opportunities to stay away from, don't get involved with drugs and gangs and that activity, gives them experiences and opportunities. They're able to earn some money. They're building skills, life skills, and credit worthiness. So lots of good things come from both summer jobs and year-round jobs. My question, I guess, is I just don't know if is 13.7, is that the number in light of our partnerships, Private Industry Council, others, as well as the private sector is hiring. I see, hire signs all over the place, and is this the opportunity for us to lean into those sort of private sector, the coffee shops, the sandwich shops, the restaurants that are all looking for workers? Is this the time and this the year where, sort of the bulk of the jobs come from sort of those partners, if you will? So again, my question, I guess, is the number 13.7, I guess, what's the science behind that specific number? Should it be 2 million? Should it be 4 million? Should it be 20 million? I just don't know where we're justifying the 13.7 on the 6,000 in light of what opportunities currently exist on the job market. And also would just, my other concern is obviously taking it from the police, as referenced by some of my colleagues. We have the benefit of looking at what's happening in other cities, our size, bigger or smaller. Many of those cities are upside down because of actions that have been taken against their local police departments. And I just would caution that one of our strengths here, in addition to having the greatest colleges, universities, hospitals, network of community health centers, life science, financial services, lots of mojo, as well as championship teams. Hopefully, Council Flynn didn't jinx us. but that we're a relatively safe city, and people come here because it's safe, and they invest here because it's safe. And I just want to make sure that we're doing the best in terms of supporting our police partners and not continue to sort of take away from what they do and the value that they add in keeping our city safe. So I love the concept of more funding for summer and year-round jobs. They clearly make a difference here. I just don't know if 13.7 is the actual number that we need to do what we need to do in light of what's happening in our economy and our partners. And I'd also caution just taking it away from the police department in a time when, you know, we're demonstrating through community policing and our partnerships that we are not like these other cities that we're seeing imploding across the country. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just for clarity, the 8 million is for 6,000 jobs, summer jobs, and the 5.5 million is for year-round 1,500 jobs.
Right.
Councilor Arroyo.
And then,
Councilor
Madam
Ryan.
Chair, we taking them, so when I'm speaking of, I guess, are we taking them together, or should I not have mentioned the year-round part of it? Or
It is
that
a total
separate?
of 13 million.
Got it, perfect.
Councilor Arroyo?
Thank you. I just have a few questions, and I thank everybody. I know it's a little late today, but I just want to get cut. So I have these as two separate amendments in terms of the 6,000 increase to the summer jobs, and then I thought that also included, but it sounds like it doesn't, the year-round jobs. I thought the 6, or it's actually short of 6, it's like 5.5 that makes it to 13.7 was for wage increases. Mm-hmm. So is that what it is? It's
wage increase.
That's correct.
Okay, and so is the 8 million specifically for the increasing of job openings, essentially the ability to take on more people, and then the 5 million is for wage increases, or does that also include the ability to take on more people?
Did you want to answer?
I can.
Go ahead.
Is that the last question, so I can answer them all together?
Well, it's probably not the last question, but it then informs like my second question, which is, are we then voting on these as separate amendments? And it's not a vote, so let me take that back, but are we indicating support on these as separate amendments or together as one?
No, they're separate amendments, but all of it will be one amendment proposal.
Okay, and then I know that the way we did this, and it's probably for the chair, I know the way that we have done this in the past is we vote support for where the money is going, and then there's this, and then we have a different conversation about where the money's coming from. Is that how we're doing this one, or is it just one vote?
At this point, Councilor Lara has support on the idea itself, where the money's going, but not the total. The last time only gathered 8 votes, or 8 support, expression of his support.
For where the money's coming from?
Where the money's coming from.
Okay, and so then I guess my question is, and this is for Councilor Lara, I think what I heard Councilor Bach and others mention, and I don't think I'm misrepresenting, but if I am, please jump in, is that if the city comes back and says we can't actually do it to this amount, then we would adjust the dollars to reflect the amount they could do it? Is that basically the idea?
They would make recommendations as to what they are suggesting that they could do.
And just to be clear, what I mean by that is the amount of people they could successfully onboard. Yeah, not like whether or not they could do this. I think we'd have to fund it for them to do it, but in terms of how and when they can onboard it would affect the dollars.
Or whether or not they are willing or capable or able to get it from the location that, the department that Lara is suggesting.
Okay, and I guess, what I would just say on this is I think that youth jobs is directly related to public safety. I think this is all sort of a public safety spend. One of the things that I have talked about with amendments, I think we have 56 or something of them that were proposed, was that if you're pulling money from public safety, I want to see it go into something that is public safety related or adjacent or directly in that, and I think this is in line with that. Because I know what youth jobs do. These are for jobs from 14 to 18-year-olds, and I know that the Boston Herald certainly has had a daily tracker of conversations about whatever thing a juvenile gets into the business of doing nowadays, and so this is very much needed, and so that's not really my concern. I also just want to be clear, and I appreciate this memo, which I saw late, but thank you, that goes into what we've seen for overages. I think we all know at this point that Boston Police Department overtime is statutory, so what we're really talking about is, are we willing to dip into reserves for youth jobs? Because whether or not we budget the overtime, they've been very liberal in using it, so it doesn't really make a difference. So really what we're having a conversation about is, this doesn't work for other things. I've talked about this with constituents where the overtime is statutory, so whether they use what we budgeted or they double it, they're getting paid that no matter what, and then it comes out of reserves. But other things we do don't have that privilege, right? So if we don't budget youth jobs, for instance, we don't pull that out of reserves. And so it's sort of a way to shuffle money from reserves into things that we're trying to do when it's from this, at least as it's created. And so I understand Councilor Bach's point about what that threshold is, but I think that this is helpful in explaining exactly what we can afford to do. And so really, to me, this is a way of funding things that aren't in the budget right now. But just to be clear, my questions for you, are those, is the 5.5 just for wage increases, or is that also increasing the amount of people we can take? And then are we voting on both those things together? And then are we only voting, because it
Here
sounds like.
today, we're only raising our hand and support.
Raising our hands, not voting.
Not together.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then that other questions to you.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. And so I just want to be clear. I want to start off by answering the question about YEE's capacity. YEE and the administration has already stated that they have the capacity for 6,000 summer jobs and 1,500 youth round jobs. That is what Mayor Wu came out with her, that is in Mayor Wu's proposed budget. So this is that 6,000 youth jobs and 1,500 year-round jobs is not a part of my amendment. This amendment is to make sure that the financial investment in the budget is reflective of how much it actually costs to fund 6,000 jobs and 1,500 year-round jobs. And so in terms of capacity, in terms of our ability to do that, the administration, by way of including this in their budget, has already said that they can manage this and that this is what they plan to do. Now, I know that, so I got the numbers from the administration, so I will get to that. We got the numbers, attrition numbers from the administration. So one, this is not about, the conversation that we're having is not about the 6,000, 1,500 jobs. They have said that that's how much they want to do. The administration is committed to make that happen. To President Flynn's question in terms of where we're taking the money from. In the mayor's budget, there's a $4.4 million increase in personnel for the Boston Police Department. And so we would talk about the fact that they're going so much over the overtime budget because they're understaffed. There is $4.4 million worth of personnel growth here in the Boston Police Department's budget. So I do think that we are, even if we do remove it from the overtime budget, we are increasing capacity for the Boston Police Department in this budget ultimately with bodies. I don't think that it's a fair request to say that because we are funding youth jobs that now we can't have community events. I think that it's a false choice. I think that we shouldn't make that choice for the people in our community. And so I don't necessarily have a budget answer to that. I think it's just a moral response of, is that what we're gonna do? I think that we can maintain what we're doing, and I think the Boston Police Department can use their overtime budget, and they will pay their overtime, and the city of Boston will pay it out as we always do. So to Councilor Flaherty's question, and I think also to Councilor Bach's question about this question about capacity ultimately. So this came up in my conversation with the administration and my conversation with Chief Masso, and one of the things that we think could be a solution is to increase the line item for the contractual services. And so the organizations, the private sector, the businesses, they have more capacity than we do to be able to hire people and to hire people on time and how many people they can take. And so we talked about moving some of this line item to the contractual so that they wouldn't just be city jobs, but that it would increase our capacity and then we could split it up between these places. So that came up. I'm more than willing to do that, to say, okay, let's move it from personnel to contractual services, bring in more partners, bring in the private sector, bring in the businesses, and bring in the community-based organizations and have them do the hiring and basically pay it out in grants. That is, to me, I think a good middle ground, and to answer this question about our capacity, and I'm more than willing to do that and talk about how we get that done. The number, the $5.5 million, Councilor Arroyo, is for the $1,500 year-round jobs and for the wage increase. Again, the wage increase is not coming from my office. Mayor Wu has committed already to increase the wages from 19 to 24-year-olds to $17. That's already in the budget. It's a policy decision that the mayor made. The issue is that because of our fiscal year, it wouldn't happen until July of next year. And so the money that is included in this $5.5 million is just to make sure that the change happens at the beginning of 2023 and not until July. So yes, it does have some for wage increases there. 19 to 24-year-olds, they were struggling. And that's the reason why we increased it from 14, we increased it to 16, and made a commitment to increase it to 17, because 19 to 24-year-olds, I mean, are basically not only taking care of themselves, but their families in this instance, and we know that we want to make sure that we're paying people a living wage. I know that there are concerns about taking this money from the police overtime budget. The chair has made sure that this is the only thing that's coming from the Boston Police overtime budget, because we really want to get your support. I think that for years, this has been a request from our constituents, from everybody in the city. It's been we've heard it very loudly across the country. 2 years ago, the Boston City Council said, we're not making symbolic votes. If we can only vote yes or no on the budget, it's a symbolic vote. We can't actually do anything about it. And then the Boston City Council embarked on a massive campaign to amend the city charter to give us the power to make line item changes. The catalyst to that was our inability to shrink the police budget. We have the power to do it now. People are asking for it. They want to see, and I think what Councilor Arroyo said is right on. This is a reparative investment, and it is a preventative investment into public safety and the well-being of young people. Is the 13.7 million number it? No, and I can get into that right now. So I've gotten the numbers from the administration in terms of where the budget sources are coming from and the attrition. Ultimately, the city is using a 30% attrition rate right now for that number. I am willing to say that because we're planning on moving some of this money to contractual and therefore increasing both retention and capacity, that if it would convince one of my four colleagues that are not in support of bringing this to taking that out of the Boston Police overtime budget, that if it would convince them to support this and give us a veto-proof majority, I am willing to consider a 25% attrition rate and bring my number down to a $6.9 million increase from what we have now.
The total amount?
The total amount would be 19.5 instead of 26 million.
What's the total amount that you're suggesting?
I'm suggesting the total amount be 16.9 million of our amendment, what I'm requesting. I'm requesting originally 13.7. So I would be, with the information that the administration got to me, I am willing to consider a 25% attrition rate and shrink that number by 25% to bring it down to 6.9 million instead.
13 to 6.9.
13.7 to 6.9.
Thank you.
If that would move any of my colleagues and make them feel better about how much we're pulling from the police overtime budget,
What
then
does
I would
that look like in each line item?
I would just shrink each by 25%
Okay,
to
thank
get
you.
to the 6.9, yeah.
One second, sorry. Councilor Lara, can you give me the math, reduce 8 million, just so I can continue to facilitate, and the 5 million, 5.5 by 25% and give it back to me? Councilor Flaherty?
A quick question on math. So if we're looking at those two, I'll just refer them as line items. Summer jobs, 6,000 summer jobs in the 2023 pay increase, and that comes to, that's 8.1, round numbers, 8.1 million, okay? Then if we're gonna look at year-round jobs to the tune of 1,500, 2023, that number comes to 5.5. So if it was apples to apples, then the second number would be more in line with 2 million as opposed to 5.5. So I guess the question is, is the differential because they're year-round jobs, so they're stretched out over the 52 weeks versus the summer jobs are a limited window? And if that's the case, that makes sense.
22 weeks.
22 weeks.
Yes.
So it runs it out 22 weeks, which would I guess that probably explains the differential between 8.1 for 6,000, 5.5 for 1,500, because it's like basically 3 times the amount. So there would be.
Except that's not a reduction of 25%.
Correct. And so I guess to Councilor Royer's point, so I guess it's summer jobs, 6,000 pay increase, school year, year-round jobs, 1,500 pay increase. There's nothing else being added into
Excuse
either
me a
of those.
moment. What are the numbers now?
Yes, no pay increase for the summer jobs, Councilor Flaherty, only the year-round jobs. The numbers for the original amendment is 6,107,000.
That's for the 8 million?
Yes, the
So
8
6
million.
million,
6,107,673.75.
600 and what?
673.75.
Thank you.
And the request for the 5.5 million would go down to 4,135,249.5.
Thank you.
So the total goes from, Madam Chair, the total goes from 13.7 down to,
6.9.
okay,
By 25% each.
got it. Okay.
Councilor Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I had one question before we voted on this, before we vote on this. Are we able to determine from the mayor's office maybe, or from Boston Police, that if we were to make this cut from the overtime budget, what impact would it have on the police and staffing levels? And I referenced that by saying many police officers, because we are down in numbers, many, as we all know, especially district councils, are forced to work overtime as part of the shift, basically, a 16-hour shift. But are we able to get a sense from the mayor's office about what impact this would have on our manning levels in the districts if we make this cut? Does that mean that Boston Police are still able to continue with the appropriate manning levels that we have, or would we reduce, the number of police we have on the street? And I just would like an answer for that before I vote, because I think that's an important factor in how I decide, is if the Boston Police say it has no impact on manning levels.
This has no impact on personnel, but I'll let Councilor elaborate.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so again, the personnel levels are going up by $4.4 million. We have 2 cadet classes instead of 1, and so we're increasing the personnel capacity of the Boston Police Department. Now, the conversations that we're having here are based on the budget hearing that we've already had, right? So during the Boston Police Department's hearing, the Superintendent of Field Services, when asked by myself and other counselors where they would cut in their budget, each of them identified the overtime budget as the place where they would cut. That is what they said here at the hearing. And so this is reflective of the Boston Police Department's own indication of where we could basically find money to fund this. He said it here at the budget hearing that the overtime spending, similarly to you, was talking about that there were a lot of events and that the overtime spending is basically the place where it could come from. So 1, personnel is going up, we're increasing capacity, and 2, the Boston Police Department has said that if we were to cut their budget, that the overtime spending is the place that we would have it. They've also, in that same hearing, failed to give the city council any information that indicated that they were understaffed. They gave us the minimum staffing for each of the district. They gave us the numbers of the sworn officers that they have. We minused the people who were out because of health or they were just on leave, and the number of sworn officers that we have was still over the minimum that we needed for each of the districts. So not only do we have enough police officers based on the numbers that they gave us here, we don't have any information from the Boston Police Department that we don't have enough cops. We're also increasing their personnel by $4.4 million, and the Boston Police Department said here during the budget hearing that if we were to cut from any place, it would be from the overtime budget. And so I do think that this is the best way to go.
Well, thank you, Councilor Lara. I might have a difference of opinion than the Boston Police Department. I think, and I have said this publicly, I don't think we have enough police officers in the city. And I've referenced that by recently 19 young Boston police officers left the force with only a 1 or 2 years of service. and they left for various reasons. Some went to the fire department, some went to various other cities or towns outside of inside Greater Boston, rather. And then we're also having a lot of retirements as well. I just want to make sure, and I know my colleagues agree, I just want to make sure we have an adequate level of manning of police in the city. And if I have to disagree with the Boston Police, then I think I do disagree with them. In my opinion, based on my experience as a city councilor and as a community leader, I don't think we have enough police officers in the city. And that's based on going to community meetings every night in the South End, in Chinatown, in South Boston, especially in the South End. They ask me, Councilor Flynn, we need more police in various neighborhoods in the South End, Peters Park or Tremont Street or Columbus Avenue. We need the bike patrol. But I know I'm just giving my own personal opinion, but in my personal opinion is we don't have enough police in the city.
And just to be clear, President Flynn, the Boston Police Department does not think that they have enough police officers. But it is the Boston Police Department's job to justify that to the City Council during their budget hearings. And so what I was saying is that the Boston Police Department did not give us that justification. So based on the numbers that they submitted here and the questions that they answered during the budget hearing, we basically have no data to show that they are not sufficiently covered. I do think that if you ask the Boston Police Department's field inspector, they will tell you that they do not have enough officers, but it is their job to give us the information that we need to make decisions, and realistically they have not. And so I appreciate the neighborhood experience, and I know that other councilors will say the same, that they're hearing the same thing, but we also know that there's a management issue. And so is it really budgetary? And again, we are increasing their capacity. We're increasing personnel. We're spending $4.4 million to increase their personnel, because it seems that the mayor also believes that we don't have enough police officers, and the mayor also believes that we don't have enough diversity in the force. And so the investment is to basically respond to that need.
Thank you. Councilor Baker, final comment. Councilor Braden, final. We are at 12 o'clock. I think we've made our points clear. Councilor Baker, you have the floor.
Yeah, just to kind of echo what Councilor Flynn was saying there, and a $4.4 million increase doesn't necessarily mean more bodies, more uniformed police officers. Through attrition, I think we're probably going to lose more people through retirement and leaving the department than the two cadet classes, the two cadet classes that are coming in. And we don't know where we're going to not have those police, whether if it's on the events like Councilor Flynn was talking about, which we're planning a lot more events. I was told about closing down Dot Ave again, to just close it down for whatever reason. I guess it's community building, but that is an overtime day. And then also to fill regular positions at C11, which would be my home police station, when people are out injured, when people, maybe take a vacation day, it's overtime that's filling that. And that's why there's not enough police there to fill the manning issues that we have the day-to-day. Not even getting into Patriots parades, Celtics parades, St. Patrick's Day, Dot Day, the Caribbean Festival. That's all overtime. And I think to say that we're increasing personnel with 4.4 isn't the truth. It's the cost of doing business. It's all going up. So that's all. I just wanted to make those points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Braden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was looking at the document with regard to reserve funds. It's a statutory obligation that we are required to do 2.5% of the previous year's appropriation, and it's reserved for. Let's see, what's it reserved for? Extraordinary and unforeseen circumstances, and it's the fact that it hasn't been dipped into in preceding years is a blessing, because those extraordinary and extreme circumstances include natural disasters, hurricanes, snowmageddons, all the rest of it. So, that money is set aside as a rainy day fund for emergencies, and it shouldn't be seen as an automatic source of funds for anything other than an emergency. So it's sort of like put in the background, and we don't touch it. unless we absolutely have to.
We are not cutting into that fund at all.
But then it shouldn't be in the conversation. It should be set aside.
The
It just is misleading. I'm
The person
sorry.
who brought that in the
I'm
conversation
sorry,
was Councilor
Councilor
Bach.
Lara, can you
And
mind
it's-
finishing that, what you were
Yeah,
saying?
you know, I'm learning as I go. I really would love to have more information on how this reserve fund is. It originated way back in 1982 or something. It's been on the books for a long time. It's a statutory requirement. But I just would love to get a better understanding on, you know, it's important to have it there, but it's not something that we routinely dip into. It's a rainy day fund.
Thank you. Councilor Lara?
We're not dipping into the fund. There were questions about whether or not moving this money from the Boston Police Department's budget would make it so that the police overtime overage would make us dip into this fund. And I presented these numbers to show specifically that the chances of us having to dip into any fund because of Boston Police overage budgets were low. So I presented these numbers not because I am requesting that we dip into this account at all, but to show that we wouldn't have to, based on the financial history of the city of Boston, that there's more than enough financial resources in every other place, both with the increase in the appropriations between April and June and the surplus that the city of Boston currently has to be able to cover this without actually dipping into the fund. So if I can, do you mind if I take another minute?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
I think that we move forward. If I think the council all have their opinions and they've made up their decision. I think you've made your point very clear, Councilor, and you've made it at least 3 times. I've heard you loud and clear. If you support this, if you're going to make a decision, make a decision. I've said that we've belabored this point. We've taken about an hour and a half to discuss this point, Councilor's amendment recommendations. And at this point, we will move forward to the next step that I've said at least 3 times. I'm asking my councilor colleagues to respect that process, if that's okay with you, or we will be here all night. No. Point of order of what? Point of order on correcting the numbers on the table before the council is there, you have a correction to the numbers that the math that she did?
Well, actually, it was, Councilor Lara's overall math was correct, but I think that the numbers, the numbers that you have on record, can you repeat them for the council?
No, you repeat them, you have them.
No, so I believe that Councilor Lara, when you gave those quick numbers, you did a 25% calc off of the 2 lines, but your original numbers are, yeah, so the numbers that Councilor Lara, I believe, is now actually proposing are, and this is where I wanted to get her clarification, it's something like 3.76 and 2.61, but it actually might be a tad higher, so I just wanted to get, basically, because she's proposing a 25% drop on the overall ask, but that comes out disproportionately of the additional. It's not 25% off of the 2 additionals, it's actually more. So we need to align it proportionately, which is a 59-41 split.
Councilor, did you remove 25% out of each amount?
I removed 25% off of each amount. The total drop is about 50%, but it comes out to 20% out of them, so we can adjust the numbers in your amendment to reflect whatever difference there is.
Can I have them for the record, please? Do you have the corrections, Councilor Bach?
Well,
or what you think are the corrections?
when I do it, I get like 3.76 and 2.61, but that comes up to 6.375, which I think is a little lower than Councilor Lara said, 6.9. So that's why I wanted to clarify.
My
So
numbers are
for-
6.1.
Yeah?
6,107,673.75.
What number did you get for that?
Sorry, that's for which one?
For the 8 million.
Right, but, so that doesn't, 6 plus 4 is not going to come to 6.9, but the proportionate thing is going to.
Yes.
Might I request, Madam Chair, that we just take a very brief recess?
No, I want to finish this. I would like for us to get on record. Are you saying that her math is wrong, that 25%?
I'm saying her initial
decrease-
math was
Let me finish my
correct.
sentence.
Okay.
The 25% decrease of 8 million is not 6,107,673.75? Is that incorrect?
Yeah, so
What is the right number?
I'm saying that I have 3.76 is not, because the 25% is off of the whole, not off of the sub-amendments. So, Councilor Art, were you at 27.2 originally with this ask?
The original ask was 26.1.
26.1. So, which means we're reducing that to 19.575.
That's correct.
And then we subtract the 14.2 that the administration has allocated, which gets us to 5.375.
My amendment is for the increase only. So
Right.
I'm not giving the numbers for the total budget. I am
Right.
giving the numbers for what I'm increasing, which is 6.9 million, to get us up to 19 from what we have.
Right, so the 6.9, what do you think the breakdown of the two items inside of the 6.9
I can give
is?
you the specific breakdown of those two. The numbers that I gave the chair were basically just a 25% decrease. If you want specific about how much comes from each, because one of them is bigger, then I can do that.
Right.
Okay.
I think the chair currently has two numbers that add up to 10. And the reason I'm asking this, just to be clear, is because I would be prepared to support a 6.9 collective number.
Yes.
But I think what currently is before the chair is a 10 or 11 collective number. So that's why I'm pursuing the correction, because I would like to be supportive.
Great. So, Madam Chair, if you, I
It's
think.
2 million, 25% of 8 million is 2.
Yes, I would, if it would be best, I would like to request that we get the numbers, but split, like do the 6.9 ultimately, like knowing that it's the 6.9, not having the bigger number. So instead of splitting them this way, because it does bring us, so basically it's 4.12 million. And then, hold on, and 2.79 million.
Yeah, so that I would support.
Yeah, that's, yeah, so, hold on, let me do this again. So, 2.79, 4.12, 2.79. And that is considering, just for the record, a 25% attrition rate that will be coming down about 7% based on what the administration gave us, based on moving funds from personnel to contractual to basically increase capacity and increase the amount of jobs in the private sector instead of having the city run them.
Your total for the increase of, or to get up to 6,000 jobs, an increase of wages for summer jobs is now 4.12. And the second one for year-round jobs to get up to 1,500 jobs, but no increase, would get you 2.79?
Correct.
Okay,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
thank you. Thank you, Council Bach. Are we ready to raise our hands? Okay. So on the amendment, and we'll go one by one. Councilor Murphy, I haven't heard from you.
I know. My light's been on. So my question is, if this was to pass, we have said that the city is not ready to fill this and won't be able to. And it was mentioned that private companies would be able to step in and grants would be given to hire youth. Is that correct?
So the question is more about not whether or not we're ready to fill them. It's about like basically our system slows down our process. And so young people work for less weeks than we have allotted for the amount. So we already do contract out the jobs. So
Right,
currently,
and
so
what
we would be.
process are we going to use for that? Which
We would-
companies are going to get those jobs and who will make those decisions?
YEE already goes through that process, and organizations. So I've been an executive director of an organization, so I've been through the process, and so you apply to the city of Boston to be an organization. And so I think, we can talk strategy. I would love to kind of work with the counselors to like get organizations to apply and all that kind of stuff, but YEE manages that process currently. The organizations apply to become youth job servicers.
So we will give them this money
They,
to
you give them,
grant out.
they get grants, yeah, and we currently do it that way. We would just be talking about increasing it so we have more capacity, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good?
Yep.
Councilor Coletta, then Councilor Bach, and this is final?
I'll be quick, I promise. So I do appreciate the move to switch to contractual services. I think that addresses a majority of my concerns. And I do also, the 4.4 million in personnel, that is our cadet class. And because we do have this increase in personnel, with this amendment, I think it's reasonable. And with this cadet class, it is reflective of the city of Boston. So there's more women, there's more people of color. So because of the move to contractual services, in addition to the 4.4 investment in personnel, I think this investment in youth jobs is reasonable. So thank you for coming to consensus on this. I applaud this body for this conversation, at least to get this number down. So thank you.
That means everybody's gonna get what they want. That's what we come down to. If we get 9 votes on this, so let's just be very reasonable when we move forward on everything else, because it's one amendment.
Madam Chair, I was just going to add in response to Councilor Murphy's question, just the reassurance. So YE actually changed its process last year because we've been dealing with this for so long. So the contractual services, it's not just kind of like an idea that would be nice. It's actually something that, as of last year, we started doing with a substantial portion of the youth funds. And it was a pilot and it had a few kinks, but it was successful in getting more money out the door. And when we talk about private entities, actually quite a lot of them are nonprofits, to Councilor Lara's point. But I do think that it's not just sort of like an idea from the council, it's an actual running program. And so the idea of shifting a little bit more into that seems to me like a viable proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bach, you sound so sweet when it's all support. When you're not getting us on the nerdy stuff. Anyone else? Okay, we're ready for this. Councilor Baker?
Is this going to be put into a motion, like, so we know what we're voting on here?
It's not a motion. I'm just going to try to count that we have nine support so that I can actually recommend it. I can't recommend it if we know it's just going to be a waste of time. So if we have it, it's one amendment, so whatever you're suggesting, Flaherty, other colleagues, it's going all in one amendment.
Well, I mean, this has been like a just throw it in the middle and then we're just gonna raise our hand. Yes, I kind of am following it, I'm not following it. I think it needs to be put into a motion, exactly the dollar amount and exactly what's coming from, like, a motion.
I will say,
if we're raising our hands, and I'm not clear with, this is a vote, this is a raising our hand, it's, again, it's all new.
Can I try to clarify?
Sure.
Thank you for your grace.
Do you mean that?
Reminding me, yes, I do. Reminding me that I too am learning. I'm going to be very clear what it is. We can't take a vote here, but I need to get a good idea, to get a general consensus that we can move forward with recommending this.
So Madam Chair, would that be in the form of a motion? And I think there's 2 here. One, do folks generally support the concept of more money for summer jobs, yay or nay? And 2, do folks want it to be taken from BPD OT, yay or nay? So we're sort of looking at sort of 2.
Absolutely.
So you could actually support summer jobs and support the concept of that,
but not where
support
it's coming
taken
from.
there. So gotcha.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So I'm prepared to make that motion if it moves the process, Madam Chair.
We can't vote here, but I just want you to raise your hand.
Show of hands.
By show of hands.
Chair.
Yes.
So for clarity's sake, though, if we can't come to a consensus as to where the dollars are coming from, does then that make the concepts null and void? I just want to be clear. Like, I just need to be really clear about what this moment means. So if you could just clarify that.
Yes, ma'am. At this point, with the reduction, I would still recommend it, but it's at the risk of the administration now taking it on and suggesting something back.
Veto it if the administration vetoes it. So trying to get, like, it's one amendment. And so Councilor Fernandez Anderson has spoken about what she's looking for. For me, there are other amendments that people want, like if Councilor Flaherty wants his ladder 5 and
Right.
he wants to take $1 million from BPS,
I
I'm willing
want
to take a
everyone to
slap
get
on the
something.
wrist of that. I'm willing to take that slap on the wrist if we're going to vote collectively to make sure that we get the youth jobs money from the Boston Police.
Yeah, and thank you, Councilor Latta. And I also want to be clear, there are a lot of other things that are still up for discussion. So it's going to be important for me to see where we're landing on a lot of things as we continue to move forward with this, because I know Flaherty's ladder 5 is something that is, and you're coming from my BPS budget, and I need to, we need to talk about those things. And so, I just want to make sure that the same grace and hour and a half that we've just spent on this, that we are willing to go tit for tat for all of the things that we're fighting for here. Because y'all know that we're a body of a whole here, and I am going to be paying attention.
Okay.
Madam Chair, sounds like you're going to be ordering out for dinner. Huh? Sounds like you're on the hook for dinner.
Fat chance, but okay. Councilor Arroyo?
Briefly on, this is process, not what we've just discussed, but I think what I understand from Councilor Baker's request is when we finally vote on this, it's not just going to be one amendment with 25 different things, or is it going to be one, and we're voting like, I think we have 56 amendments in here, but however many you propose, is it individually we vote on each amendment, or is it one thing that has all of these amendments on it and you vote up or down that entire list of amendments?
We're only going at the things that are difficult.
No, I'm not talking about right now. I'm talking about when we actually vote to make this real. When
Yeah.
we're on, so is it going to be like one vote, every single amendment is on a page and you vote for the whole page? Or is it one? Okay, so just one. Okay, that's good to know. So you basically take all of it or you take none of it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, Councilor Ball?
I think it's probably worth stating for the record that this is a meeting, a working session of the council in which the chair is seeking advisory opinions on what councilors might support in a proper open session of the council, which would have to happen at a meeting. And so therefore, the council is not taking any binding votes today. And what the chair is trying to think about is the fact that the easiest way, and it's new here, but it's standard in legislative bodies right across the country, the easiest way to kind of like package these things on the floor on our Wednesday meeting is for the chair to propose an omnibus amendment. But the chair doesn't want to propose, as I think she shouldn't, an omnibus amendment that doesn't have sufficient collective support. So this conversation is about testing the waters, right? And I do think that it's just important to say that for the record, because this council is not empowered to take binding votes in this session. So I just think like which does mean like nobody is taking a binding vote with anything that they are indicating to the chair. But I also think that in the context in which the chair is delegated with this authority and has to present a committee report which is going to contain proposed amendments, it's reasonable for her to be trying to seek a sense of the meeting in advance of that.
Thank you, Councilor Bach, for speaking
appreciate
English. Councilor Lujan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wondering, are we still going to continue to workshop some of the where the money's coming from questions?
ma'am.
Okay, that's just because I know the BPS budget actually is, we can't.
Are we good to go? This is exciting, huh? All righty. Councilor, we weren't doing names. We were doing items, but we know that some councilors, if you weren't here and you missed what I said, I was just going to read the description, where it would go, where it was coming from, and the amount. If the councilor that proposed it wants to speak on it, they're welcome to. If not, we say yes, move past that, next, okay? Now, as far as what's on the floor right now, what's on the table, $4,120,000 to come out of BPD overtime to go to youth employment and engagement, for summer jobs to reach the goal of 6,000 summer jobs and increase wages. Please raise your hand if you support the idea. Names, not numbers. Thanks. 1, 2, the idea. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, all 13. And for for this money, the $4,120,000 to come out of BPD, specifically, do you support the idea of it coming out of Boston Police Department overtime? Raise your hand. Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can cry or get up and celebrate or scream. All right. Moving on to the next one. The description is $2,790,000. The idea to go to YEE, school year jobs, to increase it to 1,500 school year jobs. Do you support the idea? All 13? For this same amount, $2,790,000 to go to YEE to increase school year jobs up to 1,500 jobs to come out of Boston Police Department overtime discretionary. 2, 3, 9, please take names. You got it? That's it. Let's move on. Do you guys know what you just did? We just overrode a veto. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, sure. We never know, right? You never know. You got time to convince these people to turn. What is it, Frank? What are you saying?
I'm still trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. That's all right. Stick around, kid. All right. $80,000 to go to city clerk personnel general support. It would go to city clerk. We want opinions about where it would come from. We have not decided where it would come from. You like to speak on it?
That's where it was going to come from.
Sorry, Councilor Braden, please tell me.
$80,000, the city clerk. Yes, here it is. Just source. It's coming from the litigation program at the law department. They had an increase in their contractual services, and that's where we were going to take it from.
There's a lot of cheddar.
It's in the document that we submitted.
Okay. We all support the idea, so I'm not going to ask for support. That's already done.
Very good.
We need to. Would we agree to take it out of the law department? That's the question. They are getting an increase. There are so many justifications and reasons why increases are happening. You have them with you, the packet that was sent by the administration. But at this point, we're just at, if that's a good idea. I'll be honest with you, even after reviewing the reasons, it makes it even more difficult because you still don't know the domino effect that it has in terms of moving funds around. So let's be very careful in terms of departments in the city. And I know that everyone here does not want to take money out of personnel. But if there is a significant increase, I can understand why you would do that. And I think that law is actually a part of the report that they sent back, and the impacts of other departments. The scope of work is legal services for citywide needs, and impact to other departments, additional support for public facilities, police department, public records, and mayor's office of housing. This is the explanation by the administration. And the reason specifically, personnel reorganization, new advisors for the other departments, support for public records, additional outside counsel services. Does anyone have any concerns or questions on this one? Okay, can we get a 9 on this one? Yes.
I'm just trying to find the actual sheet, but the idea here is to move $80,000 from the legal department into the clerk's office?
So the justification, the Human Resources worked with the Law Department to conduct a comprehensive markets study resulting in a regrading of legal positions and a 22% increase in the appropriation for personnel services. Hopefully, with the increased in-house investment, the Law Department will not need to rely on contracting out for legal services, and that money for the clerk's office would come from the contractual services from the legal department. And the legislative support program of the clerk's office should increase by at least one whole. The reason we're asking to is it's helpful. It's that the clerk staff have increased. Their work has increased exponentially over recent years, especially with each ordinance from the city council or the mayor offices, and then also the whole area of lobbyist registration. So that we've increased their workload without increasing their personnel in many years. So I think it's just a shift from, it's not 1,000 miles away in terms of the roles that were being applied, but the Law Department is proposing an increase of 20.6% for contractual services, with a total of nearly $2 million. So we're feeling that the deduction of $80,000 is a modest moving of funds over to the clerk's office to help them handle their increased workload.
And just a question for you, if you have it, or the administration, if they have it. It's my understanding that the law department does contract out a lot of their cases for significant amounts of money. Whether it's the report that we just saw with the Mission Hill School or other things, they tend to contract out a lot of their money. And so I just want to know how much or how often they go over what they've budgeted contractually for that, just to sort of know the butterfly effect of taking $80,000. Because on paper it sounds relatively small, but in practice I don't know how much of an impact that actually makes when I know they contract out so much. And I believe we're down to 4 city lawyers at this point. I think we're at like 50% of the amount of city lawyers that we generally have.
Madam Chair, I think the issue is that they have the large numbers of vacancies.
Yes.
They're pushed to contract out because they don't have the personnel to do it in-house. But hopefully they've got funding for those vacancies. If we fill those vacancies, then we shouldn't be needing to contract out. That's the rationale.
Okay, I understand the rationale. Thank you now.
Okay. We have enough people here. We're just missing Ms. Coletta, Councilor Coletta. Can we move forward to support this with 9? If you agree. Yes, Councilor Bach.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I think just the one challenge I'm having is I do think that, like, obviously things are going to trade off against each other in terms of like where we think there's money that we can take plausibly. And so it's hard to vote in a vacuum, or not vote, express a sense in a vacuum.
She's already gotten support on the idea. If you don't support where it's coming from, don't raise your hand.
But what I'm saying is I can't make a judgment about that without knowing what the sort of total amount of things that we're looking at is.
Did you step out when I just gave an explanation of what the administration said, their reasons and the impact?
Perhaps I was in the bathroom. Yeah, did you just do that? But what sheet is that?
That's the packet that looks like, sorry, a bunch of, it's a chart.
But isn't this just their changes from past years? Yeah, I'm not saying, yeah, I understand the context about the overall budget. What I'm saying is, let's say that I think that there is $80,000 to give in the law department, but the judgment about whether I think that that $80,000 makes sense to go to another position in the clerk's office or like another tree pruner, right? Like at some point there are direct trade-offs, because I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, and then there's another 80, and then another 80, and another 80. So I do feel like we have to kind of understand the universe of what we're considering in order to express.
Do you have any input?
Well, so I guess, does the chair have a sense of a quantity of funds that she believes that we might be able to?
I'm laying out what I think, what I recommend is okay.
So everything you're stating, you're recommending right now? Oh, that's a horse of a different color. Okay. And do you think?
How I started this was by saying that we can have a conversation about everything. Like,
Right.
the administration's response was just that. Like, we can have that conversation about every single line item we suggested. I've done the best that I could in the last couple of days to look at areas where I felt was less harmful or to go interdepartment, right? And so this is what I'm laying out now. If you feel that you have an input or a better suggestion, this is a time for you to make that recommendation.
Okay. And can the chair share the total number that she's proposing?
80,000.
No, for across the amendments. Like when we go through all of them collectively.
No.
Well, I mean,
We'll
it's
get
going to
there.
become clear, right? So I guess, but that's the point, is like.
So it's not coming, I mean, it's not like I've aggregated so that I can tell you exactly what is the total that we're actually amending from one department to a different department, or what is the total from intra-department. If that's what you want, like the total number of what's on the table right now, I'm not ready to do that because I have certain things that were pending. I want to read them on record to talk about the ARPA things that concerns that we had. I want to talk about the things that were suggested in capital. I want to deduct this number as I go. So there's no need for me to do that.
Okay, I just want to convey that I think it's hard for us to provide a complete sense of where we are without, so.
Yeah, let's get there.
That's all, yeah.
Be patient,
Yeah.
please. Thank you. Councilor Arroyo?
And so what I'm understanding is that everything that you are presenting to us today is something that you as the chair support?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Well,
That's good to know.
That I have done the best that I can to present it,
okay.
either differently or the same. If I feel, look, this is still a problem, I'm going to state that on the record. I'm going to say, this BFD suggestion is still unclear.
Gotcha.
Did not find solutions between myself and administration or myself and myself.
Okay.
And it's open for discussion. What Councilor Bach is saying as the chair, what are my recommendations? I'm saying I'm okay with this suggestion, with this particular
Gotcha.
one.
Okay,
and then
that's
she
helpful.
asked about the total of all numbers that we are on the table to amend.
Yes, which I'm less, so one of the things that I'm trying to figure out just is this the only, so more helpful to me than a total number is, this is the only appropriation coming from, say, the law department. Because I have to weigh how much money am I actually taking from the law department. If I say, yes, this one sounds interesting, but then there's another one that takes 800,000 and I prefer that or I disapprove that.
180.
Perfect, so is it possible
Was
if-
that your question too, Bach? No, right?
Question. It's
Okay.
just about being
So
able to see the
it just
bird's eye
helps
view.
me, yeah, it just helps me prioritize. Like if I'm gonna take a certain amount of dollars from a department, rather than like as we go down the line saying, oh wow, I think I just took $1 million from this department, being able to say, I would take this, if I had to prioritize these, I would do this, but not these because I'm doing these ones. Like that understanding for the department, less than the overall. The overall is sort of irrelevant to me in the sense that I'm just trying to figure out what I'm taking from each department when we're talking about money coming from that department. So if there's 2 or 3 or 4 that come from the law department, it'd probably be better, at least for my thinking, if they come as a whole, if they get presented as a whole, so I can basically say, okay, this one, no, because we're already doing this one, or whatever it is, so I can prioritize that. Because I don't want to give false support to things, where I say, yes, I support that, but I didn't know this one was coming, so now I can't support that because I'm gonna support this one.
Okay, we can go by departments.
That is, it's really
Can you
about the
guys,
net take.
can you stop doing that before, I was gonna respond. I will go by department. Yes, Council Bach?
I was just saying that I think Councilor Roy is right. It's not actually about the total number, but it is about the total within departments, so that I don't feel like I'm overburdening one with.
Okay, so not the total number, the 29 million, but
Yes. Thank you,
Give up.
Councilor Bach. You can keep agreeing with me, it's fine.
we're down to 29 million, okay? I give in. So, and that's not counting, that's not
10 million
counting.
including Councilor Lara's or not?
Including. But that's not counting the stuff that had issues, like, that we had to clarify. I want to give people a chance to say, that is not a capital, or let me move it into operating. And Councilor Baker still didn't move in his 10 million. Okay.
I was busy last week when you guys were at work, and I was busy. But you know I want 10 million for a field house, so I'll get that in there someplace. Have you heard about the field house?
You're consistent.
Have you seen the value in the field house?
Yeah.
Mental health,
Oh.
training, making kids whole, all of that.
Everybody.
Well, yeah, you can't give it to me. They need to give it to me across
All of
the
us-
hall. If you can get them to give it to me across the
fight-
hall,
yeah,
I'd
we
vote
can
yes
fight
on
for it.
everything.
We can fight for it side
Should
by
we just
side.
go get a room someplace else and we could take the, never mind.
We don't have, like, we don't have the same jurisdiction over. But she's saying she's gonna give you the vote.
The 10 million.
Yeah, but still, it's up to the administration.
Can you get someone across the hall to pay attention to it? That's all. You get that. Neil, do you know about the 10 million for the field house? Chantel,
Do you know what's Field House?
Everybody knows about the field house. Sorry to digress, Madam Chair.
That's okay. Yes.
Of personal privilege, which is just,
What does that mean?
it means that I, as a person in the council, need a favor, which is just to say that I super promised that I would be at this organizational board meeting in my district from 12 to 2. I obviously have missed the first hour. I need to go make a little section of it, so I would just ask if you could not present
Table
my
your stuff.
amendments while I'm here. That would be lovely.
We
Thank you.
presented before you got here.
Yeah.
We had to come back to you anyway because of the BFD questions. Okay, we're moving on. Council Braden, where did she go? All right, we don't know, 180 to move from law.
Same time, so
Yes.
I just have, that's perfect.
Yes, we just, according to you, we're gonna go department by department.
That would make more sense just for me, because I don't want to give anybody, like, the total number we take from a department impacts that department, and so it's better for me to know if I'm taking 80,000, but then there's another 100,000 that comes down the pike, and I'd rather do that, but to make that justifiable, I'm not gonna do this. I want to just sort of know the general scope of department by department, so I know exactly what I'm hitting them for.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. We'll do that.
And I guess just to flag it, if any money is going back into that department for some reason, if we're like shuffling shares, like if I take up 800, so let's say we have 180,000 coming from the law department, but somebody else put 250,000 back into the law department, just anything that relates to departments, I guess, in a subtraction addition standpoint, so I know what we're talking about, is just very helpful.
I'll do the best that I can because I didn't.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're doing great. This is obviously the first time we've ever done any of this.
Is it obvious?
I mean, probably to the public, yes.
Council Braden is not back, so we'll move on to the next law department decrease, which is she back? All right, thank you. Law, here we go. There's a suggestion to build youth capacity to build capacity for the Youth Council in Opat, Office of Police Accountability, from law, just $100,000 to go to the Youth Council. That's it? No, come from law to OPAT. You mentioned give you the other law
Yeah,
decrease.
so there's $100,000 coming from the law department. Is there a specific line item, or is it just law department?
Yeah, no, just, hold on, I can. Why do you care about law department? Is it because you're a lawyer?
Is and what this $100,000 is going to do?
The OPAT department is working on a youth council. They are interested in working on interventive measures that creates opportunity or platforms for youth to do more interventions or crisis interventions. And they're building that youth council, and they had asked for $1 million increase. I think they got $200,000 increase, not the million. I'm just suggesting something very modest, a gradual increase to give them the time to build that capacity and prove that this is doable before next year for us to look at it again. That's right. And I think that in government services, it's doable. And then I'm open for suggestions, please. You have the budget breakdown in front of you. Yes, Councilor Mejia.
Madam Chair, I'm just curious, would this be to provide stipends or to build the infrastructure? Could I just, how many young people are we looking to support? Do you have any of those details?
Thank you. It would probably be for 2FT to work on implementation, to build out the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any recommendations on to take it out of somewhere else that's on the table too? Mm-hmm.
I am supportive of the recommendation of taking it out of the law department, but I think the $100,000, if they've already received a $200,000 increase and they're using the $100,000 to hire someone, I would probably reduce that. If they're like implementing the program, searching for young people, depending on the size of the council. But that's only in relation to the $200K that they've already gotten. So if they're going to use, if the $200K is also going to the youth council, then I would probably
80?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Done. Any other concerns or questions? Arroyo, we're waiting for you.
Yeah, I mean, I do have questions. Mostly, so it's 180,000 total, two separate things, one going to the clerk office.
Right.
The other 100,000, is it coming from?
It's now 160.
So it's 80/80?
Yeah, 80/80.
Okay. And whose proposal is it? That's also helpful. Okay, good to know. All right, thank you.
Okay. If there aren't any absolute restrictions, we're adding that to the amendment. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. And that's it for law. What's coming out of law? Let's look at stuff too that's being moved around for BCYF. Out of BCYF. And it's only going to be one, and it's BCYF to BCYF, by the way. There's a recommendation to allocate $80,000 for the senior programming at Nazaro. Again, that's $80,000 just to move from BCYF to BCYF to the senior programming at Nazaro. Yes, Councilor Coletta?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of clarification, it's for youth and senior programming.
Oh, thank you.
At the Nazaro Center. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. From BCYF to BCYF. Youth and senior programming at Nazaro. BCYF to BCYF? Oh, yeah, no, there's no specifications, but if you want us to get into it, let's look at it. Do you have any recommendations?
No, I just thought that we had to vote on the specific line item, but if we only have to vote on the department, then I'm fine.
It's intra-department, so it's kind of like a recommend, it's us saying prioritize this thing.
Yeah, we don't need to have the conversation then, I'm fine.
Thank you. If there aren't any oppositions, we're gonna move forward. Okay? That's the only intra from BCYF anyway, so we'll move on. Next department, let's tackle arts and culture. And I only have one. Sorry, let me just make sure. Yeah, one item, intra-department again. This is $200,000 to go to for contractual services for the arts corridor in District 7. From arts and culture to arts and culture, they have $20 million coming from ARPA. They're saying that some of that is activating arts, art spaces or art, public art. So I'm asking for $200,000 to go specifically to the art corridor in District 7. From how many? Yeah, so like the arts and culture, they're getting the 20 million. So then I'm saying, okay, well, since you want to activate art, there's a project already starting in D7. Can you just spend $200,000 in the first year for the activating?
That's in your city operational budget now, and then you can backfill that with the ARPA money.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any opposition to adding that to the amendment? Thank you, guys. And then that's it for arts and culture. Let's go to anything else that was recommended from BPD, since we already heard BPD. I have a recommendation for $600,000 to expand resources from BPD to go to blackmail advancement. I don't have a specific line item. If the maker would like to speak on it, now is the time. If there are any oppositions, please let me know. And I guess OT is what we are feeling, it's more clear, but this is just $600,000 to go to blackmail advancement. Any oppositions? Yeah. We don't have 1, 2, 3. We're missing 1. 1, 2. Okay, we'll come back to that item. Should we just park BPD since that's the toughest one? Okay. I will park all BPD. Attorney Goldberg, do you mind highlighting all BPD in yellow like I'm doing right now? Thank you so much. BPHC to BPHC. Anything that's moving around in BPHC or coming out of BPHC. EMS supervisor in, where's this guy? It's also his. All right, fine, let's go to something else. $345,000, we're gonna go to, this one is asking for it to remove some from OBM and some from Do It. 3 FTEs, 1 budget analyst staff, 1 performance supervisor, 1 tech staff, a total of $345,000 to go to city council personnel to give us those 3 supports. Again, 1 budget analyst staff, one performance supervisor, and one tech staff. Would the maker like to speak on it? Yes.
Is this the, so just to be clear, it's 3 analyst FTE roles for central staff budget management and 2 for technology.
Yeah, so one tech, one performance supervisor, I reduced it to that, and I think this is doable.
Okay, where is it on this sheet?
Sorry,
Okay.
it's a sheet that it's my recommendations, it's
Okay.
just something that, yeah.
Okay, well, so the purpose of this is because we now have this new power, but our staff, we don't have enough staff really internally in the city council to really help us through this budget process. Michelle has been doing an incredible job, but I think really to be able to like lean into this role, having more support would be great, and having that transfer from A&F makes sense because it's about sharing power between the city council and the mayor. So that's the reason for where the decrease would happen. And same idea around technology. I'm not sure if did you change where it was coming from? Or is it consistent?
So I think that we have to break it down to amounts per, like, where it's coming from, because we have both in one category.
Okay.
So I think, do you have any suggestions, or I can make them?
You can make them.
I think that we should go for 100,000 in OBM and the more in Do It.
So 100,000 in OBM.
And the 245 from Do It. You're asking for the tech and the supervisor.
Yeah, and so just so that I'm clear, that would be for 1 analyst FTE role?
So like maybe 145 and then 200 in Do It. Because the budget analyst makes sense. I think we should take it from OBM. OBM is getting an increase. Sorry, Jim. And the 200 can come from Do It.
That's for positions for here.
For here.
For city council.
To help us with this whole.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially because as we're going into, what we learned during COVID, making sure that we're able to continue having virtual options to increase the capacity, that it's not just all falling on one person. So making sure that we're building out our staffing capacity at City Council. I agree with those amendments, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone have any opposition? Okay. Councilor Lara?
I'm just trying to find Do It on here because I know that the city council, but also the mayor's office is trying to implement a lot of like digital equity work, and I'm not sure if they got an increase or not. So I can't find it I can't find it here. So not opposition, just wanted to be clear what I'm looking at.
In the budget spreadsheet, you can't find them?
Well, so I'm guessing that they didn't have a 10% increase because they're not in this document.
Right.
Which means that their budget is the same as last year, so would this be a budget cut for them?
The mistake I made was asking for a percentage,
Got it.
because a 1% could be significant too.
So they did get an increase in the
Yeah.
budget? Okay, got it, okay, that's it, that was my question, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't cutting
It's-
from what they had in FY22.
I'm gonna, did you find them on the budget sheet?
I can look.
We'll need to, because I think someone else suggested Do It.
Yeah, Councilor, I think it's Councilor
Morrell.
Braden. Maybe
Oh, Braden, yeah.
Got it.
Yes, Council Braden?
I have a little reservation about taking funds from Do It. I do appreciate Councillor Louis-Jean's suggestion that these staff positions are necessary for central staff, but in the light of increasing threats of cybersecurity and then our digital equity push across the city, I'm just wondering if there's anywhere else that we can pull those funds from. Do It is a department I'd like to increase funding for, but that's by the by.
Overall, the department is getting a 4.48% increase of 1.8 million.
Got it. I'm looking at it right now, I got it.
would be supporting city council. That might seem like a reasonable,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
We're trying to take.
You're just
the- yeah,
tagging it and saying that the city council needs our technical support.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if we wanted to live and do it, then we would say do it to do it, but
good job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the broadband digital equity is getting a dock of $1,057,000.
yeah.
They're adding for core infrastructure, but the digital equity stuff is actually, their budget is shrinking.
And in applications, yeah.
And the data analytics and the enterprise applications. So their budget is growing by 4%, but it seems like the two things that at least I've heard from city councilors are a priority for us are dipping, which is broadband and digital equity.
Both of the things that I support. This transfer here is really thinking about supports that we would need from Do It, right? Which is why it would be for supports for city council that we would otherwise be leaning on Do It for. So I want us to put more money into municipal broadband, and I want us to put more money into those. This is just regarding the technology services that we would be leaning on and having those in-house in city council anyways. Beautiful. So not for,
My recommendation is just to take 200,000 from core infrastructure.
Yeah, I was gonna say just take it from the line item that is getting an
Yeah.
increase and not the ones that are decreasing. I'm fine with that.
Okay, I'll finalize what we agreed to so far. Okay, so one FTE as a one budget analyst to take 145 from OBM to city council personnel, and a tech support and general supervisor, 200,000 from Do It core infrastructure to city council personnel. Any opposition? Are we good now on the same page before we move on? All right. Sorry, guys. Okay. Let me just look for anything else, Do It. All right, also asking for $50,000 to come from Do It to parks toward burial funds. I guess this would be an RFP. And do we want to talk about not taking money from there? Maybe there's money in parks already, or does the maker want to comment on this?
Move it to parks, yeah. That works better.
Can I make a suggestion from public health?
Yes. From public health?
Bloated budget, and that, I believe, sits in public health. And we've talked to Tina Cherry's crew in there. I mean, they're looking for more than 50, but
Yeah, I would have suggested double of that.
yeah.
Well, they requested 50, and then they asked for $75,000 for another line item, which we're requesting for in this amendment as well. Your suggestion,
No, I think so. The rank and file city departments, the ones that are out there doing our work, the work that we see, I think we should leave them all alone. Public Works, Parks, Transportation, even ISD. We need to be investing in them. They're all short-staffed. Public Health is stacking the money right now. And they also have been the beneficiary of most of the ARPA money. So just a friendly sort of thing. I think it should be coming out of Public Health because it's very much a public health thing, even though the burial sort of fund sits with the Parks Department. I think it should be coming from Public Health. And again, you're the maker of this. You do what you want. Just a suggestion.
all right, I'll take the suggestion and have it come from public health.
Yes, Council Lara?
There's a bureau in the Boston Public Health Commission of Children and Families, but there's also the Emergency Preparedness Bureau, which could be responsive to that, where the trauma response team
Yeah.
kind of lives. And so thinking about the trauma response team is oftentimes kind of responding to families who have lost someone, and if they could have resources to kind of like connect, like if the RFP could be there so that they can give the RFP out to the community organizations to kind of, they can connect them to, that would be helpful too.
Yeah, happy to work strategy and talk
Yeah.
further in depth about, the strategy on this.
Okay, if there aren't anything else. Again, proceeding with what has been suggested to come out of Do It. I don't have anything else. All right. We were talking about BPHC to BPHC. We said yes to the SOAR program, right? And let's continue on BPHC then. BPHC to BPHC, EMS supervisor to implement services to teach community on first aid, and did you want to speak on that?
Yeah, so this is an effort called Stop the Bleed, which will educate our community on CPR, how to stop a wound. Also having someone like the CSO department and police department, the fire department, to go to our schools and go to our community meetings to just educate them and try to create that pipeline of new EMS students coming into the EMS field. And I'm just asking for another supervisor in the community initiative department to increase the capacity and help with outreach and training.
Initiative department. Okay. And Council Overall is just recommending 80,000 be moved intra-department again. Okay? Moving on. BPHC to BPHC. Councilor Murphy is asking that BPHC provides training, professional development, or training on how to address mental health or mental health crisis intervention to staff. City Council staff, administrative City Council staff as well. I mean, you want one? All staff.
Yep, if you yourself already are, that's great, but to provide that service so that our offices have at least one, if not more, trained staff members when we get calls or we're out in the neighborhoods and we can respond properly. There is an amount. How much did we put in, Chair?
80,000.
Well,
It was
80,000, yeah.
Last to increase our budget at all instead of going to other departments?
Yes,
We did.
yes, it's coming.
Are we speaking to each of the line items still, or?
No. At this point, these are things that we discussed slightly and
Okay.
just, we're at 9 votes at this point. If there's an objection, if it's absolutely like, no, I don't support that, let's talk about that, let's move the money. At this point, we're at 9 votes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do just have one question on it. Not in opposition, just a question. Is that money for staffing, or is that for the trainings themselves or contracting the training?
For them to come and train our,
So it's contracting essentially?
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So
And it's training they do.
So it is an RFP, it's a contract role?
Well, no, the Boston Public Health Commission has people on staff who can come to us
So I
and
guess
train us at a time that we could find that would work. Like they come to the schools to give teachers training
And so we pay those people individually, or we're just saying that the BPHC needs more money to do it for us?
Not more money.
Well, the money from internally we're shifting.
right,
'cause
making
BPHC
sure that those people who are already being paid to do this training put us on their schedule, that they come to us and they don't say, well, that would be overtime, or we won't be able to get to you, that we make sure that we are a priority on their list of city employees who are trained in this.
It's a narrative, no, it's a narrative, some people were late, like everybody else. But it's a narrative suggestion. It's just saying, we want to make sure that you prioritize the council's staff in providing this training.
Yeah, because the Boston Public Health Commission's trauma response team who would be doing this training doesn't actually need an extra $80,000 to come do the training. So I think it's a signal of like, we need to, the Boston Public Health Commission doesn't do overtime in that sense. And so if we were, for example, contracting, like the Boston Public Health Commission gets trained by somebody else, so if we're bringing that person to like train all of our constituent services staff, then there would be a cost for that training. But if we're asking the BPHC staff already to come here and we're trying to signal to them like, hey, then that number can be anything.
But everything has a value, right?
Yeah, exactly, that's what I
so-
mean, I'm like the 80,
yeah,
like
so we
the
have to
number
put
can be
something on
anything,
it,
yeah.
My recommendation was that it was just a narrative, no numbers to it.
Beautiful.
If it's personnel, if it's
Because
just
it's
intro.
BPHC from BPHC.
Yeah, but if it's contractual, which I recommend because BPHC does have a hard time building capacity with clinicians, and it's easier to contract a couple of people to do this part-time, where, you know, $80,000 could possibly contract 2 clinicians to do this on a part-time basis, to come in and co-facilitate. Usually things like this takes 2 facilitators
Yeah.
to co-facilitate this type of professional development.
But it's a 2-day training.
Is it?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
two 3-day training to train our constituent services directors. Even if you want to be generous, you can say, 8 sessions or something of like really in depth. Like if a constituent, and then Councilor Murphy, please correct me if I'm misinterpreting what you're saying. We get a bunch of calls here, right?
Yeah.
We're responding to families, people die, like all of those things in the neighborhood. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that our staff members who are responding to this, right, like who are going into the neighborhoods and responding to them, have the proper training to respond to our families and our constituents. And so if the Boston Public Health Commission has the capacity to give that training, then they would come. We're asking them to come to the city council, like you said, it's a narrative. If they do not have the capacity, then this $80,000 is to hire people who would be traveling.
No, that's not my thought. And if
Okay.
they're already offering trainings, we go to them.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't have to be specific that, you know, we have a special training.
Sounds
They
like a
can share with us
conversation then,
the
not a budget
calendar
amendment.
of when their trainings are offered, and we can just make sure that they allow our staff without cost to our budgets to sign up for
Yes.
those trainings.
Yeah, so
So
I
I'll
think
speak to
Councilor.
excuse me, I think I'll speak to my recommendation that for example, yes, Councilor Lara, you make a great point. Like if this is like something that happens quarterly, for example, and you get updated or upgraded or whatever. But if the whole point is so that our staff can be okay, right? That there may be room here to create some sort of professional development on a group therapeutic basis where people can get together and actually, you know, either triage or get recommendations on how to address when they are overwhelmed emotionally on these issues. And we know that our staff in general, not just constituent service directors, but also other staff, that they deal with these stressors on a daily basis. If we could provide this contractual in a way that, you know, every other week there is time allocated for folks to be in a group setting that is therapeutic, it's self-care.
So
But it's just
ultimately,
a
like to hire a facilitator or a clinician through BPHC, that would be specifically for the Boston City Hall or the City Council specifically. Okay.
What do you guys think? How do we move forward? That it's just personnel and we're just asking BPHC to sending in a signal? Or is it worth creating contractual so that we can create that therapeutic space?
I think the first.
The first? Okay.
I think
Then we remove the number.
Yep.
It's not an amendment, but I will put the narrative in there to send a signal.
Thank you.
No problem. Moving on. Okay, ISD. We were on, Councilor Braden, this was already done. ISD was, for those of you who missed it, additional inspectors on pest control. Councilor Friend, Braden, I think Flaherty, like we were all supporting moving it ISD to ISD to prioritize additional inspector for pest control. And we already said okay to that. And then the second one was $12,000 for rodent abatement, ISD to ISD as well, also Councilor Braden. And we have already said okay. Sorry.
Raise. 12,000 isn't very much. Citywide problem.
What's your recommendation?
I would say at least, I don't know, I would say at least 60,000, you know. It's tough to put a number on, it, you know, how much do they pay now? What's the cost now, you know? We're kind of, huh?
Liz's district alone is overrun.
Yeah, well, that 12,000 probably wouldn't even cover her district, so I know we're all having rat problems these days.
So it's Braden's.
See, I'd like to just make a point there. ISD raises about $75 million a year, and they don't get their cut. I mean, do we need to cut something from their budget and move it? Or we should be able to say, okay, add 125,000 in there, 10,000 per, you know, 130,000, 10,000 per district or whatever, you know, without having to take it from here to move it to there.
Well, Councilor Braden is here, so maybe
Councilor,
Where are we at? What are we talking about?
Pest control,
12,000.
Pest control, I agree with Councillor Baker that the ISD generates a huge amount of money from permits, etc. So I think it's possible to take it from within ISD.
Well, why only 12,000? Why 12,000?
12,000, it's for materials, it's for baiting and
for
dry
Alston Brighton.
For dry ice?
Also Brighton, then 12,000?
Are they gonna let us use the dry ice?
I think whatever they use.
So
I
120
think
for citywide?
12,000 was a modest ask. I didn't want to, it's an increase in what they're already budgeted for. It's an additional 12,000, so.
You just have support on the council for a
Request for a lot more.
Yeah. What are they budgeting for now? Do you know, Liz?
Not off the top of my
you can
head. I
get
don't know
back
what
to
we're
me on-
spending
we can
on
get back
rat
to me
poison.
over.
If you know, we did think about increasing it. Like I think putting it up to 20,000 would seem reasonable, but.
My recommendation was that it would come out of just moving it around, just reallocating ISD to ISD, 120,000.
120,000 for materials?
Citywide.
That's a lot of rat poison.
That's all just materials? I mean, because if they're gonna get serious about it, they're gonna need FTEs and they're gonna need...
No, we're budgeting for an FTE as well. This is just for materials. This is for rat boxes and baiting.
Was the, sorry, was the 12,000 just for Alston Brighton originally? Were you thinking for citywide?
How did you come up with the 12,000?
Yeah.
Citywide.
Do you feel peppered with questions now?
It was citywide.
Okay.
You know, a lot of the baitings, you know, developers, contractors are supposed to do a lot of the baiting.
Yeah.
The baiting that the city does is baiting on storm drains and sewers and things like that. Just it's not, we're not going around the city baiting everybody's house.
All right, then Councilor Coletta, go first, and then I'll make my next suggestion.
Sure. So somebody mentioned dry ice. I just think we all need to realize that there's one company that does dry ice across the
We had
state.
this discussion before you get
And they
inaugurated.
monopolize. Okay, then everybody knows what I'm talking about. So we should plan for that, but also negotiate. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilor Coletta. So, Councilor Braden is suggesting $12,000 just for bait, but we want to address this issue citywide. What do you guys recommend?
So, just to touch on one quick thing that Councilor Baker brought up, which I agree with, but is unfortunately not what we have for folks who are watching. Unfortunately, because the mayor sets the budget and the way that the amendment was written is we can't go over it every increase we make, we have to take something, which is, I don't know any other legislative body who has to do that, frankly. So that's pretty awful. But in terms of the pest control problem, this is an issue even in my district. I think it's an issue that shows up in districts that have had a lot more development. So South Boston, Alston, Brighton, as the development happens, as these nests come out. This is to Councilor Braden, and I'm not sure if she knows off the top of her head, because you said they are hiring an additional person.
No, we're asking in this amendment to ask them to hire an additional pest control person.
How many do they have right now?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Is it like, can I count it on one hand, basically?
Probably.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, how much are we asking, how much would it cost to staff just one additional person? Would it make sense to increase our ask for 2?
This is like the Hoagie conversation we had last week. We started, and I'll raise you one, you know, so I think given the scale of the problem that we're facing, like we hear a perennial problem with our rodent control issues, it doesn't seem unreasonable, but I was focused primarily on trying to address materials and also, you know, if there's 5 people and adding another one is a 20% increase in their FTEs. So that's in theory, I don't want to be. Again, we're back to this old bone of, you know, we appropriate funds for extra staff, but then we can't recruit them, and the money's left there, not unused. So that's always the question as well. It could be, you know, a modest increase, and then see how we go with it, and then increase it again next year.
Okay, and then the 12,000, obviously, so I know you were being asked if this was just for Alston, Brighton, or the city, but the materials aren't designated that way. When you put the number together for 12,000 for materials, that is what this. Is that what they asked for? Was there some, like, in terms of how did you get to the number for 12,000?
We looked at what they have already, and then we made an increase in materials.
All right. Well, I think everybody here is willing to go higher, but I'm going to follow your lead since it's your amendment.
Yeah, and I'll do the same. So, can I speak for a second?
Yes, of course.
To follow up on Councilor Coletta's discussion, and I've been listening to it for a couple of years, is things that we have to contract out for, that there's only a single company that does it. Painting lines, our crosswalks are one of those things. There's very few companies that do it. So I've been saying to the previous administration, the administration before that, well, then why aren't we buying those machines and training those people? If we're experiencing an enormous uptick in rats, and there's only one company that does it with dry ice, and we've established that that's the most effective way to do it, why aren't we training our people up in how to get in there with dry ice and do what's the most effective treatment? Just a thought to complicate it a little bit, but that's where we should be thinking. How are we building city services with this money that we're shuffling around? And again, I wish we did this with APA, so we could be building city services in our input on how the departments are going to interact. So this here, although good, we're kind of coming at it as in a very disjointed way. 12,000, how do we come up with that? We should have more employees. We should have people that could be able to go into the holes and do the dry ice. Again, sorry to digress a little bit, but I'm trying to wrap my head around this process here and how we do the best by the city and the city departments. I consider myself a city department person, and taking from departments and us not being in the departments and knowing exactly what they do, I think we might create some enemies within city departments here. So,
I think, Madam Chair, the issue.
We're talking about a modest amount.
Yeah.
Let's move forward.
yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. We're just talking about a small amount. The only thing we said is the additional inspector for pest control, we asked for $150,000. We've already moved past that. That was ISD to ISD, just saying prioritize pest controls because that's a thing. And then we said rodent abatement. Councilor Braden suggested 12,000. And then we said, well, that's not enough for the citywide. What are we suggesting? What is that final number so we can move forward?
I think Councilor Arroyo said and I agree with him there, let's defer to the person whose amendment it is. I mean,
Councilor Braden then?
Let me see where my $12,000 came from.
Okay, so Councilor Braden is staying on $12,000.
The line item for supplies, this is the line item for supplies and materials for ISD field services, that's what we're talking about, is $34,450, and my proposal was to increase it by 35% increase in that sum, and by the addition of another $12,000. I think $12,000, a 35% increase seems reasonable, and that's for across the city.
and that's bait in boxes?
That's what they, you know,
Materials.
the budget book doesn't go into that sort of detail, but that's what we're thinking.
Can we now move on? I think we all agree that that is reasonable, even if it's small. It's just an increase to what's already proposed, the 34,000, so increasing it by 12,000. If there aren't any objections to that, we're gonna move on. Okay, the next one, Hokies. 13 Hokies. I'm going to read what where they're going. We had said 2 in Alston Brighton, 2 in Chinatown, 2 in East Boston, 2 in D4, 2 in Roxbury, 2 in Fenway, Mission Hill, Beacon Hill, and South End, and 2 citywide. I didn't see any for Dorchester.
Huh? What did you say?
I meant, sorry, District D5. Sorry.
I'm D3, he's D4.
D3, not D5.
Yeah. I have one that everyone tries to steal from me, so if I can get any more.
You're getting an increase this year, aren't you?
Did I get the 10 million yet?
I meant redistricting.
Madam Chair, did you just say we got the 10 million?
No, that's nothing to do with me. So 2 in D3. We're adding 2. Can someone do the math? The total amount for the Hokies were 13 Hokies. We said $500,000. What is the suggestion to add 2 more? Okay. Thank you. So we're bringing that up to 540, and to add 2 Hokies. Sorry, you said 62 and I said 40. Okay, I'll do 565, add 2 Hokies. Are we all set? But here's the, Neil, did you tell them to start that noise and disrupt us? The recommendation was that it comes out of BFD unspent funds, whatever that means. So, and then Councilor, this was Councilor Box's recommendation for it to come out of Boston Fire Department unspent funds. And there's a lot of those, so we're gonna table it to discuss it later. Fair? All right. Since Councilor Box is not here. All right, Councilor Flaherty, everyone, not just Councilor Flaherty, everyone, but recommended by Councilor Flaherty, Car 5 and Ladder 13, $1 million to go to Boston Fire Department. However, we don't know where it's coming from, because general wasteful is not a thing, or not a specific thing.
I'd say from wasteful spending perspective, it would be outside legal counsel. We have our own law department upstairs, that's what they're charged with doing. That's what we pay them to do, represent the city and protect us with respect to liability issues. There should be very rare circumstances by which we assign or farm out or engage outside counsel. Seems like we're a little trigger happy on outside counsel upstairs when we should really have our own team of lawyers, which we do. They should be lawyering upstairs for the people of Boston instead of calling up someone that they know that works at a firm, asking them to handle something. Again, very rare and very specific instances where it's a niche that we don't have an area of expertise, but general liability is as simple as it gets in the practice of law. And so I would suggest that we curtail our outside legal spending across the board on all of our departments. Again, that's why we have our own law department, and those resources could be used to support Car 5 and Ladder 13 of the Boston Fire Department. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone has any comments or concerns about that? Council Coletta?
So I just have some concerns where we're already pulling $160,000 from the law department. If we're trying to expand our personnel within the law department, we're already pulling that money. So I agree with you. We need to curb contractual services from the law department, but we're already proposing $160,000 being cut.
Yeah.
So if we could just clarify that, if it's coming from personnel or if they have, equipment that they don't need right now or, whatever.
And I would also, I would offer I raise the outside counsel waste first before our colleagues did that. But I could also recognize the fact that if we would expand our meter maids and allow them to work later into the evening as well as including weekend shifts, we would raise significant revenue to offset any expenses incurred by adding Car 5, Car 9, tree pruning, rodent control. There's some low-hanging fruit there in addition to the services and the fees and fines that are levied over an inspection service and code enforcement. So we need to do need to do a better job of harnessing those revenue generators that we don't. So allowing our meter maids to have a shift that goes beyond 8 p.m. to say 10 or 11 and allowing them to work on the weekends if they, if we have a shift, we would raise millions of dollars. We don't do it for whatever reason, so.
Are we reaching capacity now to what the need is in meter maids?
No, I mean,
So,
you think
no.
about our business district and particularly around the South Boston waterfront, there's no reason why those meters can't go beyond 8 o'clock, particularly in our entertainment district as well. Our theaters, our restaurants, our downtown, over and around Back Bay, Newbury Street. No reason why those meters cannot run past 8 p.m. And again, that's the workers themselves. They would have to bid a shift, right? So you could have a shift that goes until 11 o'clock. That might be a great opportunity for someone, as well as on the weekends, to go past 8 and to go on Sundays, particularly in thickly populated neighborhoods. Residential parking arguably is ignored from Saturday afternoon literally until Monday morning. So when folks can't find a place to park in their own neighborhood, it's because of overnight guests, arguably most of them from out of town. They know that the city does not enforce resident parking on the weekends. Again, adding a weekend crew, provide overtime or a new shift for folks, put people to work. Novel idea, but they pay for themselves. Meter maids pay for themselves. Inspectional services, as Councilor Baker referenced, they pay to themselves. And again, to that point, ISD, they raise a tremendous amount of revenue and they don't even use a fraction of it, yet we continue by ordinance dump more on their plate, so it's because there needs to be a fairer sort of distribution. So where we would come up with $1 million, it can be, I guess, a number of different factors: outside council spending and putting pressure on BTD to expand the meter maid, the enforcement division into the night and weekends. Don't even get me started on the towing. We also farm out our towing to the tune of what it costs to get towed when we have our own city tow vehicles and tow force that we could also employ to generate additional revenue.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the alternative suggestions. Let's stick to the numbers that are before us right now and what we can work with. If anyone has a suggestion, please, now is your time to speak, or an objection to that. I mean, $1 million is a lot. I agree with Councilor Coletta. That would basically cut like most of their increase, and I'm sure they have a reason for it.
And obviously, one of the key components in addition to public safety is we will be diversifying the upper echelon of the department with, we'll get at least one, possibly two chiefs of color, one, possibly two deputy chiefs of color, and then we would also get in the captain, lieutenant rank. So if we want to put our money where our mouth is with respect to having our departments and our city leaders look like the face of the city. I could make no stronger argument, and we missed the window here because the individuals who are positioned to slot into those spots, the civil service list, the current scores die, I believe, within the next month or so. And then therefore, competition starts all over again, and we lose, the city loses that opportunity to have a chief and district chief, captains and lieutenants of color.
Oh, have you looked at library administration?
I did not.
Their numbers are like significantly high, and I guess I wonder why they're getting an increase of about $1 million.
And again, if we were thinking sort of strategically and smart about this, Councilor Baker several years ago talked about our municipal parking lots as well as our libraries and community centers having capacity either to have parking in our local business districts and or increasing housing and business opportunities on either the lower levels or the upper levels of those buildings in exchange for whether it's rent or parking fees. Again, great idea that we should continue to explore to generate additional revenue for our city. Could also talk about the issue of city employees bringing their city-owned vehicles home and the cost associated that with the increase in fuel at the pump, the prices at the pump, coupled with maintenance and repair. We probably want to do an audit as to which city employees I guess, get to or allowed to take their vehicle home and which ones really shouldn't, and either take public transportation, buy an electric bike, I'll give you a ride in one of my 5 cars, etc. But there's a significant number of city employees across the board that take their vehicle home. And I think that we need to maybe take another look at that, particularly given fuel prices at the pump, as well as the cost of maintenance and repair, to the tune of who knows what that number is, but I'm sure it's significant.
For the sake of us moving forward in this amendment, I would like to work with numbers that we have currently proposed in the budget or the administration has proposed in the budget. I think library administration has a big increase there, but if anyone has an objection to that.
Objection, just the library was here yesterday and they were talking about all the work that they need to do around continuing to making sure that our libraries are secure, making sure that we're doing the work around civic engagement, around racial equity. So without more information, I wouldn't want to take money from our libraries.
So the other thing that was proposed before is we take money out of BPS administration and or contractor, and we can't do that. Mm-hmm. So I'm still open for suggestions.
And if it gets to a situation where we can sort of maybe put that off to the side in light of not actually knowing whether or not it's $1 million, it could be less, and we're also factoring in a recent announcement of 2, possibly 3 retirements that may be able to absorb a chunk of that and or allow us to push for further diversity within those upper ranks. So there's some moving parts. So as a matter of basic fairness, maybe we get someone from the administration or Connie Wong from BFD to maybe give us an exact dollar amount. So it 1 million may be inflated. I think we're basing 1 million for car 5 on the number for car 10. And it's really not apples to apples because we are at least 2, possibly 3 retirements that may get absorbed within that. So I would offer that if it's a concept and an idea that people support and we just haven't agreed on where we're going to take the funding from, it might be helpful if we identify what the exact cost of car 5 in letter 13 would be. And then we can go at it from that point. We may be able to get it in some of the ideas that have just been talked about.
Okay, we'll come back to that. We'll go on to the things that I think we can move forward with. A suggestion for historic preservation, $150,000 to go to preserving historic museum in Historic Arts Museum in Roxbury. This would be an R5 for $150,000 for historic preservation. It's interdepartment.
Historic preservation.
Historic preservation. It's a new, by the way, it's a new department.
Is it live?
In historic preservation. Historic preservation to historic preservation. It's like one line, new department. I'm just creating a line item to say that they create an RFP for $150,000 to preserve a historic arts museum in Roxbury.
Was that born out of CPA? Or in partnership with CPA? How's that gonna?
I don't know how
I guess
they
who's gonna oversee, my question, I guess, is which department or who's the chief? Who will oversee that division?
I don't know. It's a new department.
Historic preservation?
It's a new.
historic?
It's a new department. I haven't heard anything about it.
Would it fall under D&D or what is it, Office of Housing now?
Go to where it says
Could be,
new.
you know, it could be property management, Madam Chair. That might be a function for property management.
For property management.
There could be one for them.
I mean, it's an RFP though.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
This is just contractual, so I don't know. This is not property management, like, doing the work. Lunch has arrived, so,
Councilor Bach may know the answer to that, because I know she does a lot of work with the historical preservation folks and Back Bay Architectural, et cetera.
yes.
Thank you. I just had a quick question or a comment. I don't know if you may want to weigh in on Councilor Flaherty. Do we know, does the city buy, when they fill up for gas, is there a central location for city vehicles? Is there a contract that the city of Boston has for vehicles, or is it each department gets its own gas from a various location? Just wanted to see if anyone had any information on that.
I know Public Works has their own pump over at Frontage Road, so that might be, you know, I don't know if the fire department has it and the police department.
The reason I ask is maybe if the city departments kind of pooled together and went to one or a couple of different locations, maybe it might be an opportunity for the city of Boston to save some money. But just something to think about. I know, obviously, with the price of gas, and it's a discussion we just had, so just wanted to highlight that in the conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council Flynn. Just to close out what's on the table right now, there's a new Office of Historic Preservation. And Historic Preservation is getting $1.2 million, $1,252,523. And this is brand new. I'm just suggesting that $150,000 of that gets put into an RFP to preserve a historic art museum in Roxbury. It's just an RFP. It's not, you know, we're not managing anything, we're not fixing anything. Put out the RFP and let the historic museums in Roxbury apply for it. And it's intra-department.
That looks like an ARPA request to me, and again, we're back to full circle.
Yeah.
ARPA. Why didn't we do this here with ARPA,
Yeah,
Madam Chair?
right, because I don't oversee COVID recovery committee. So I think I would have done it like that, where it's a negotiation. If we're voting down the mayor's, you know, proposal of to spend $350 million, and then we're sending our recommendations, or whether we're gonna have this process in that committee, that's up to the chair, who is not here right now to answer. But I think we can definitely suggest it to the chair, Councilor Bach, to create this process.
Right. And again, I would never stand in the way of something that you want for your district.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia?
Chair, thank you. And I would also like to second Councilor Baker's recommendation. I do believe that we have and continue to miss an opportunity around the ARPA funding. And while I do appreciate all of the hearings that we've been having, I just don't feel like we really have a voice. And if it's one time and there's going to be lots of things that we're asking for within the operating budget, it just feels like the Hunger Games. Like we're having to fight within the little crumbs that we have when there's like all of this other money that we can also tap into. So I would like to go on the record and also suggest that the chair of that committee revises the way she's doing business so that we can also feel heard in that space.
I'm happy to bring up this point again because there are a lot other ideas that the chair herself in the last working session suggested that there were ARPA requests. I heard that a lot. ARPA. So if that's the case, then I'm happy to open up that conversation when she returns. For now, I'm saying that I've asked for this specifically, and I was told no. And so I'm asking that this gets allocated because there is a new Office of Historic Preservation and getting 1.2 million. I'm asking that that office allocates to a grant for historic preservation as what the office is supposed to do, just $150,000 to repair because Roxbury does not get historic preservations typically. What we get are crumbs. We were in the historic preservation hearing where or at least when they came as panelists, and we heard people say that, you know, Roxbury and Dorchester and Mattapan didn't want fancy things. And we do. We want fancy things. So I am trying to set precedents. I was told no. I went to, and I asked, hey, can I get this for this museum that's falling apart, that volunteers, they have volunteers working there every day for free, cleaning it up, doing patchwork, fixing up the it's called the Big Head Museum. You guys know where it is. Fixing it up, doing tours, art, people coming in and out of the museum all the time. It's used, but they can never get any help. So that's why I'm asking
They
for
need
it.
their roof repaired also.
Oh, so Mr. Gaither has got you. Thank you. So just 150,000. They need more. They need 500,000, but just 150,000.
And the other 350 will come from ARPA?
I wish. I hope so. I'm saying that we should push for this process. We should say, this is not it. This plan is not it. We need a different process to include our projects. I mean, the whole hearing and combining things is feeling a little
Well,
bit.
combining things waters it down, and there's been a whole budget put together now. We're supposed to vote on 350 million all in one piece. I think if that's the way it's gonna move forward, not totally sure on it, but that's a lot to vote on. If we fight over or bandy around every year in the city budget, it's you got 250 million or whatever that we can move around. And in this one-time opportunity, 800 million through here, and we haven't really been asked our opinion on it yet.
The reason I was yes, and let's hold that conversation when the chair returns.
Yes.
The reason why I'm asking for it as well is because I was told that because it can't be like sustainable, like every year giving money to a nonprofit to fix this, to preserve this historic site, that they couldn't do it because ARPA says that it has to be sustainable. And so I was given that reason, and that's why I asked in here.
So that's can I continue to talk here? We're a little off subject. That's the same reason I talk about with the free busing. It's not, that's not a one-time thing. I would argue, if I were you, that a repair that's gonna stop the water from coming in a building, a one-time repair is a one-time expense. That's not operating. Repair and expense. Repair is different from operating expenses. Can I make one more point?
Unless it's contractual from that operating that they're suggesting in historic preservation.
Yeah, okay, I'm with you. Lunch is here, you know. I'm ready to
Lunch
start
is
eating my
here.
hands.
I guess before we go, I guess can we raise hand if we're gonna move this? If not, can we raise our hand if we're gonna move it? Let's count the 9. Okay, we have 9. Thank you. Thank you so much. Lunch, we'll recess and return. How much time do we need? 30 minutes? 30, good? Yeah? Okay. Recess 30 minutes.
Run the